fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, 9th year of Changi, first month, and the 12th day by the heavenly calendar. I'm Tim Elder, and I'm joined with Greg Knoll this morning. We're here in place of the second king of Chanuguk, Hyung Moon. And thank you for joining us. Let's go to the weather first. It's 27 degrees and clear at the Chanuguk Palace, and we're expecting a mild day with plenty of sunshine, with a high today getting up to 54 degrees.
Hallelujah.
And the nice warm weather is going to hold for one more day while we have our blessing tomorrow. It's going to get up to 55 degrees tomorrow with high clouds and again mild. And the temperatures will hold one more day, 52 for Thursday, but it's going to start raining Thursday afternoon, and it will rain into Friday. And on Friday, the temperatures will be dipping down to more normal levels in the lower 40s. Nighttime temperatures over the next few days will be in the upper 20s and 30s. So it's a little bit warmer than usual, but we're going to get down to normal temperatures for the weekend. Unfortunately, that's going to mean some rain, at least on Friday. But Saturday, though, although it's cooler, I don't see any rain in the forecast. All right.
Well, this is a great relief, Tim.
It is?
You know, this is
We did have a lot of rain, didn't we?
well, just the Book of Life registration blessing. It could be in the teens. This
Yes.
part of February,
It could be.
and with all the visitors in town and everything, it's just logistically, it's a great blessing from
Logistically, a
God.
blessing.
To be in the 50s in February is a gift that we should give glory to God.
Yes. Praise God. Thank you very much. Logistically, a blessing. All right. I want to go through some of the headlines on Breitbart this morning. CNN's tapper on Trump's claim he'd confront Florida shooter because President Trump, I think yesterday, said that if he had been there, he would have gone in and he would have confronted the shooter. But Tapper said that, he used deferment to avoid Vietnam. Of course, a lot of people did that, and I don't think all those people would necessarily have avoided, if they were in that situation, have avoided going into the high school. You know, it's the Scott Peterson, who is the deputy, Broward County deputy, who chose not to go into the high school, but to take what he calls a defensive position outside, I think behind his car or something like that, while 14 children and 3 adults were being killed, while Nicholas Cruz killed as many people as he wanted to, and then disposed of his weapon, and then walked out of the school disguised as one of the students who were evacuating. So Nicholas Cruz had free reign of the place for as long as he wanted, and he was able to kill as many people as he wanted to. I'm not sure why he stopped, ran out of ammunition, just got tired of killing, I don't know. But he faced no resistance from anyone, not from the police, and of course not from the unarmed teachers and administrators, not from the unarmed security guard, who was also a football coach, who threw his body into the path of the bullets in order to save his students. He faced no resistance from anyone. And Scott Peterson says that, he put out a statement through his lawyer, I believe, saying that he did a good job. And specifically, he says, I called in the mass shooting. I told where the location was. I gave a description of the shooter. And so I did a good job. And you know what? Under the law, he's right. Under the law, he's right. Because the law, so this is an important difference between police and soldiers, or military personnel, military personnel, that we need to understand very clearly. if a soldier or a sailor or a Marine does not engage the enemy when they're faced with the enemy, then they can be court-martialed. But not so with police. Because the police do not have a legal obligation to protect us. I want to look at a New York Times article that we referred to just briefly yesterday. This is a New York Times article that was published on June 28th, 2005, reporting on a decision by the Supreme Court. Justice has ruled police do not have a constitutional duty to protect someone, is the headline of the New York Times in this article that they published online by Linda Greenhouse on June 28th, 2005. This is the New York Times site. This was reporting on something that happened the day before, on June 27th. The Supreme Court ruled on Monday that the police did not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm, even a woman who had obtained a court-issued protective order against a violent husband, making an arrest mandatory for a violation. So this is, the court was dealing with a specific case where a woman had a restraining order against a man, and when he came to attack her, she thought the police would come and protect her. She was wrong. They did not. Some people died as a result. I believe her children maybe died as a result. Yes, 3 young daughters whom he eventually killed. He kidnapped the daughters and then he eventually killed them. And so she sued the city, saying that the police should have protected me. They had a legal obligation to protect me. And the case went to the Supreme Court and she lost. And in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that this obligation does not exist. Now, in some communities, apparently, in some communities in America, the community itself has created this legal obligation. And I'm not too sure on the details of that, but I've read that in some communities there is an obligation, but apparently Broward County, Florida is not one of those communities. And so this man, Scott Peterson, was there, shooting going on, and he's got enough time on the job to retire anytime he wants. He's earned that right in terms of the time that he's put into the job. He's got the right to retire at any time. So you can imagine what kind of calculations were going through his mind. Is he going to go in there and risk his life?
Potentially shoot a student by accident.
But then, yeah.
And then have a lawsuit against him.
Right, yeah. Or get shot himself, you know?
Yep.
So he took the course that was, and he knew the law was on his side. I'm sure he must have known the law was on his side. He did not, and he knew that I've done my job. I've reported the shooting. There's a mass murder going on in this high school in Parkland, and
I'm sitting behind my car.
That's right, and I know who's doing it. Well, here's the description of the shooter.
Yeah.
They say maybe he even knew the guy's name. Probably knew his name because this guy had been in trouble a lot.
Probably knew exactly at that time where he was shooting.
Right, yeah. I've done my job. I've done my job. So, and then the other guys who came from the Broward County, there were 4 deputies in all from Broward County.
All behind the car,
Sheriff,
right?
all behind their cars. And then the people from Coral Springs come, the policemen from Coral Springs come, and they have a different set of values. All right? They have a different set of values. They're not looking at it from a legal point of view. They're looking at it from a human point of view. They're looking at it from a guard dog point of view.
Yeah.
There are unarmed people being massacred. And by this time, by the way, the massacre was finished. And he was already escaping. But Coral Springs guy said, let's go in there. We're going to go in there. And of course, they just assumed that they would go in there. There There was no let's go in there. They just went in there.
Yeah. There's also children suffering at this point.
Right. There are children. There are kids lying on the floor, bleeding, potentially dying. Although fortunately they were all transported to the hospital, and apparently all their lives were saved at the hospital. Those who were injured and were not killed on the spot. So they went in there not knowing what dangers they might face. But even after the Coral Springs police went in there, still the Broward County Police chose to stay outside, or at least some of them chose to stay outside. Maybe some of the Broward County guys went in there as well. But I think I don't know. I think Broward County is going to be known as Coward County from now on. I don't know, because this is
shameful behavior.
Yeah.
From a human, like you said,
From a human point of view,
perspective, yeah.
yes, it was certainly shameful behavior. And I don't know how long Scott Peterson will live, 20 years, 30 years, maybe 40 years, I don't know. But whatever length of time he has remaining on Earth, he's going to be living with the fact that he made this judgment at that time. And I think criticizing President Trump in this way, saying that, well, he says he would have gone in there, but after all, he didn't. He didn't go to Vietnam. He used a deferment to avoid Vietnam. It's what the CNN guy says. But a lot of people didn't go to Vietnam, especially if someone was in college. Seeking a college deferment was almost a matter of common sense at that time. And this is quite a different situation where you're actually faced with a situation where you're actually hearing shots going off. You're hearing shots going off, perhaps screams. Perhaps you can hear screams. I think it takes a certain. I think it takes a certain depraved mind to just sit there and not do anything. And I think 99.99% of us would have gone in there if we had the tools. If we had the tools with which to deal with the situation. In other words, if we were armed. I think most of us would have gone in there. And I think President Trump was only expressing that fact, that he and most of the others, if we were there, if we heard those screams, if we heard those shots, and we had a gun, I think we would have gone in.
Well, it calls into question how much are we actually protected by the police.
Yes.
It's good to find out in your local municipalities what rights the police have in confronting violence.
Yes.
Because if they're in the same situation as Broward County, then you're not really protected from a violent intruder.
Yes.
And again, it calls to the reasoning, the logic that we need to defend ourselves.
Yes, it does. And I remember when our children were in high school in Northern Virginia, there was a resource officer there. He had a room and he sat behind that desk. But it calls into question, these resource officers. Why are they given this assignment? It's kind of a cushy assignment. They could be out chasing drug dealers, putting themselves in harm's way that way, or even, routine traffic stops. I understand are one of the most dangerous situations that a police officer can face, because they don't know who's in the car, what's going to happen. So compared to that, resource officer at a high school must be a fairly safe and cushy job. They just so I just wonder why those particular individuals are. What did they do to get that position? It brings up all sorts of doubts, and I think people who have children in high school with the resource officers, police officers stationed at the school, need to ask, who is this person? And when the gunshots start ringing out, is this man going to run toward the gunshots or away from the gunshots? It's a valid question now.
Yep.
Yeah, and in general, the police does cause us to take a second look. I know that 99%, maybe 90%, I don't know 99%, but of police officers will protect us.
Yeah.
Not because the law requires it, but because They are human beings with a conscience, and they are trained to train with the skills, and they are given the tools with which to protect innocent people, and they have a guard dog mentality. So even if the law, regardless of what the law says, even if the law says they don't have to protect us, I know that they will, and I'm very grateful for that. But we do need to step back and take another look at this situation where we need or what's going to happen. I want to show a video now of Larry Pratt appearing on David Knight's program here. Let's see here, because he talks about gun control and what's going to happen. Let's take a look at this.
One key mistake that we're seeing now here in the schools is the 1990 Gun-Free School Act. It was the brainchild of Joe Biden. It was signed into law by George H.W. Bush. And now we are seeing more mistakes being proposed in addition to that, rather than getting back to the core solution. Joining us now is Larry Pratt. He's the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America. He has been for over 30 years. I like Gun Owners of America because they have always been uncompromising in protecting the rights.
Here he was in the Sunday service at our church on Sunday.
Never compromised on that. And you know, we go back to 1990 when they put this
Friday, right? It was Friday?
Saturday.
Saturday.
Larry Pratt,
One day's running into another here. Saturday he attended. He spoke he was the main speaker at the Thank You, President Trump dinner in Matamoros.
I'm sure we'll have something to say about that. That was in 1995. And you can find him at gunowners.org. Gunowners.org. Thank you for joining us, Larry.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me with you.
We've got the Congress coming back, and now everybody's talking about what they're going to do. And so the question is, I want to ask you, as somebody who follows the political situation there, what do you think they will and will not do as they come back to Washington, D.C.? What problems are they likely to do to make, what are they likely to do to make the problems even worse than they are now?
Well, we know that almost all of the Democrats are going to be supporting more gun control. The problem that we're going to have is that too many of the Republicans are going wobbly on that, and we could end up, probably the best case would be if nothing happens, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature is in session.
And now they're coming back, so watch out.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Watch out, indeed. What we're trying to do with the Congress, and we're asking our members to double down on the email and phone calls and make sure these folks know that.
And also, let's support the Gun Owners of America with our donations.
Want more gun control.
If you haven't become a lifetime member yet, please do so.
That 1990 Act that you've referred to, that was one of Joe Biden's many, many brilliant moves. And there's a lot of dead people piled up in these schools, thanks to Joe Biden.
That's right.
There's a lot of blood on his hands.
Yeah.
And all
98% of these
mass
shootings occur in gun-free zones,
and the first,
including schools.
George Bush, who signed it into law. Shame on them.
That's right. And as you pointed out, and it's very, very important, and you tell your members that, very important to speak up, because we know that the Democrats are going to monolithically vote for any kind of gun control that they can get. So the question is, we've got these, as you pointed out, wobbly Republicans, these swing Republicans. You don't know what they're going to do because they don't have any rudder, they don't have any anchor, they don't have any principle, but they do have a Republican base. And if Republicans will speak up about this, I was talking about this earlier in the program, in Hawaii, they wanted to shut down homeschooling. They said, no, we're going to have background checks, and you're going to have permission from the government before you do this, and we're going to be constantly monitoring, all these different things. And the homeschoolers said no. And even in Democrat Hawaii, they were able to push this back because they came together as a group. That's what makes gun owners and homeschoolers so formidable, is the fact that people will stand up and talk to these elected representatives and hold their feet to the fire. And it's really essential that we do it at this point in time, isn't it?
And one of the reasons that many parents have chosen to homeschool, obviously they've got objection to the curriculum, that's the main one. But I think a contributing factor is if you put your kid in a government school, the government school doesn't believe in self-defense. They think that you've somehow said something salacious if you're talking about having an armed teacher. I remember the first time this came up after Columbine, we put out a news release saying the problem at Columbine was there weren't enough guns. And of
That's
course,
right.
what we went on to explain is there weren't enough guns in the hands of responsible people, those that work at the school, even somebody from the public that might have been there, a mom visiting to see something about her kids' studies, whatever. The dirtbags have known for a long time, and it's so amazing that year after year after year, the same atrocities are perpetrated, and there's no corrective response from the legislature.
Yeah, they're holding.
And you know, the left always has the same script that they use. And what they say with regards to teachers being armed, first they assume, they falsely state, they don't assume that, but they probably know better, but they, for their purposes, they say, oh, you can't arm all teachers. One of the demonstrators outside of our dinner on Saturday was interviewed. Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Saturday was interviewed by a television station. And she says, well, if I were carrying a gun, I'd be afraid that one of my students would take it away from me. Well, okay, we're not going to give you a gun. You know? If you don't have that retention ability, if you're not trained, we're not going to give you a gun. And as the chief was saying, he was saying probably some teachers would hand the gun to the student. Here, you need another gun? Here. This one's still got some ammunition in it. We'll shoot some more people. The chief was warning against that. But here, what we're actually referring to is something like 10 or 20%, but perhaps, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But teachers who have CCW, that is the license to carry firearms, as we call it in Pennsylvania, can carry those firearms on the school, whereas currently they are banned. From doing that.
And you want the element of surprise. You don't want to broadcast that every teacher necessarily.
Right.
You want the predator, the dirtbag, as Mr. Pratt calls them, always to be questioning. Oh my God, there might be a gun.
Right.
They don't know.
Yes.
So, but you're right. Absolutely. Only the strong should be strong mentally and disciplined mind.
Yes.
Should be the conceal and carry.
And yesterday, the King was referring to the cartoon that was carried on InfoWars a few days ago, where you see there was a picture of a fork in the road, and there's a mass murderer trying to decide which way to go, right or left. And one sign says gun-free zone, and the other sign says we are armed or something like that. And he's trying to decide which way to go. Obviously, the choice for the mass murderer is obvious. He's going to go to the gun-free zone.
Sure.
Now, another thing the left always brings up is says, well, the police come and they don't know who the good guys are. They're just going to start shooting anybody who has a gun. But again, obviously, that did not apply in the case of this Parkland High School, because by the time the police arrived, the situation was all over. The murderer had disposed of his gun, and he was walking out the door, disguised with his hands up, disguised as one of the students being evacuated.
I don't know if it's been studied, but how long does the average mass shooting last? I would say it's less than 5 minutes.
Yes.
So what's the police response time generally? It's much more than probably 3 to 5 minutes.
Hey, when seconds counts, the police are only minutes away.
Exactly. So first responders need to be civilians and faculty and teachers.
The people who are there.
Right there on the
people
spot.
Who are there on the spot.
Trained.
Yes. They are the first responders, whether they like it or not.
Yep.
And I had a phone call from an irate citizen recently, and he asked me, how many times have been? He asked me, why do you need an AR? And I said, for self-defense. And he says, who do you want to defend yourself against? I said, someone coming at me with an AR. And he says, how many times have you been attacked with an AR in your life? And I said 0. And he said, he said, how many times are you going to be attacked by AR in your life? And I said, I don't know. And he says, well, you're not going to be attacked. And I said, praise God. I didn't know that I was receiving a phone call from God himself. I mean, how does he know? And statistically speaking, the chances of perhaps maybe low. But it's that one time that you have to be prepared for. And it's for that one time that that we all need to be prepared for and ready to. If we are all ready to defend ourselves in that one time, then that one time will not happen to anyone.
And it's not just you, Tim. It's you might encounter a predator attacking innocent lives. And that's where Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor."
That's
So when I put on my conceal and carry every morning, that's what I think. I say, "May God, Heavenly Father, I hope I don't need to use this today, but if innocent lives are being taken, then I pray to have the courage and the righteousness to stand in the position of a sheepdog and protect innocent lives." I think that's that's the bottom line. We can talk all day long about love your neighbor, but if you're not willing to, as Jesus said, lay down your life for somebody, then it's just talk. It's hot air.
Yes.
So, I think this is the defining line, whether you're really a sheepdog or not. Are you willing to really give your life for the sake of others? And Father talked about that constantly.
Well, let's continue to listen to Larry Pratt.
Our children hostage to their agenda of gun control. As a matter of fact, it was last week I was playing a report. They were interviewing a sheriff, and I don't recall if that was CNN or MSNBC, but he talked about how they went through and they vetted very carefully the people. They knew them. The principal would only suggest people that he knew, and then the sheriff would vet these people and talk to them, interview them. Then they would do an extensive background check. Then they would give them very, very extensive training and so forth. And it was followed up by the interviewer saying, "Yeah, but are they going to be allowed to carry AR-15s?" And it's like, these are people that are essentially have been totally vetted by the government. They don't even want deputies, as they were talking to some of these people. You're going to have deputies in there, but are they going to be carrying an AR-15? We can't have any of that stuff.
And let's just lay it out for discussion. Okay, it's going to be a little clunky if teachers are walking around with an AR-15 strapped on their back. But I wouldn't mind having a bunch of teachers with a 9mm or a 45 hidden somewhere on their person. Nobody knows for sure which teacher is actually packing. That means the dirt bag doesn't know either.
That's right.
That's
an essential part. That hidden, the fact that you don't have somebody in a uniform, you don't have somebody carrying a rifle, you got somebody carrying a concealed pistol, that is a very essential part of what some of these jurisdictions have done. They said nobody knows who the teachers that we've vetted and trained are.
In Utah, I have to check, I think it's about 15 years, they figured out how to get out from under this horrible, dreadful federal gun-free zone act for schools, and they haven't had any of these episodes. They've got nut jobs in Utah, but they haven't had anything like this happen. You've got some counties in Ohio and in Texas that have also made it clear. In fact, I think it's in Texas. The school has a sign up saying, warning, the teachers in this school are armed.
Actually, I think he's mistaken. I believe that's Oklahoma. Yes, there's a school district, and we've shown that photograph saying that, warning, we're going to use all necessary means to protect our students. I would be very, as a parent, I don't have kids in school now, but as a parent, I think I would be very comforted to see that kind of a sign outside my child's high school. And I think it's unfortunate that those signs are still rare.
Sitting ducks is the term that accurately describes the risk that children are at in a gun-free school.
Yeah, that's right. We protect our president with guns. We protect our money with guns, but not our children.
Not our children.
And the left thinks that makes sense.
And they want to expand
that. That shows that they're not concerned about our children. All right. Maybe they see our children as somehow kids that should have been aborted. I don't know. They're not concerned about the lives of children.
Maybe they want schools that have 50, 60 armed security walking the hallways, which also creates an atmosphere of incredible paranoia.
That would be very unfortunate for a child to have to grow up in that kind of a prison-like atmosphere. But to have teachers, and I think that would maybe revive some of the respect for teachers that is seems like a long lost memory now, not only by the students but also in society. When you look at your child's teacher and you realize that he or she is not just teaching your child but also protecting your child's life during the school hours.
Well, another thing that would overall benefit would be it would develop a sheepdog mindset within the teachers, like that King has been talking about. This kind of alpha male, alpha female would be developed. That epigenetics would be unleashed.
Yes.
The sheepdog within would be unleashed, and that would be a good thing. That would also create a respectful environment within the classroom. If the teacher's gone through the training, the discipline to be a conceal and carry person, they're going to carry themselves differently than a beta male or a beta female.
Let's continue with Mr. Pratt.
And they've been doing that since 2006. You know, there are loopholes in that Gun-Free Schools Zone Act that Biden and Bush put through. But there's loopholes in that to say, well, except for people who are representatives of the government. So they can come in and they can deputize these people or whatever. They can get around it that way. But I think the rightful remedy is just to say, we're going to nullify this because we got a Second Amendment. You had no right to put these restrictions on people. And in the same way that you've got states all over the country nullifying the federal government on the war on drugs, the marijuana aspect of it, it's very important to come in and say, and call them on it when they overstep their jurisdiction and their powers, and they have in this particular case.
What are the feds going to do? Come in and arrest some teacher they have figured out is packing heat in that school to protect the kids? That would be a really great message to send. I don't think that deep state is willing to do that, at least under this administration.
Yeah, so just they have to stand up for the rights. But again, getting back to the strategy you were talking about, the immediate thing, and again, this problem is going to be solved at the local level. And I think it's going to be solved by sheriffs taking, you can elect a sheriff, get a sheriff in your area that is going to work with teachers, create a teacher's posse, a teacher's militia. You can call it the posse academia, I called it, because I said, hey, maybe that we can appeal.
And a lot of people now, including Car Arms, I believe, are coming out and saying, we will help the teachers in our area to receive this training for free.
For free?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think a number of sheriffs have come out and said that, or former sheriffs. I believe either the current or former sheriff of Pike County has put out that kind of a statement. But the point is that this kind of training is available to teachers, and many times for free. So I hope that teachers will find out about that. And what Larry Pratt is suggesting is that even before that, maybe teachers should go ahead and just take their weapons in there, concealed, and if they're discovered, Larry Pratt is saying, are they really going to prosecute that kind of a person who's carrying a weapon to protect his students?
Probably depends on the school district.
Well, yeah, that's we'll see. We'll see. It would be
a great media coverage on
Yes,
that. That would bring
a brave man or woman who does that, but perhaps someone with the sheepdog mentality who says, you know what, I'm not going to allow this kind of thing to happen.
It should be a local decision.
Yes. That would be an individual decision on whether or not to go ahead and kind of a civil disobedience type situation in that case. Yes.
Appeal to these teachers and get them to kind of think through the militia, and I want to talk to you about that as well. But the solution is going to come at the local level. But meanwhile, we have to fight a defensive battle with our phones and calling our elected representatives, don't we?
Well, one thing yes, that's exactly correct, and I would say go for those state legislatures that haven't acted yet. There are a few, but one of the things that might be done is to call Governor Scott in Florida. Apparently, he's got the legal authority to dump a sheriff. He can just tell that guy, you're fired. And he needs to hear those two words.
They actually already did that. We had a sheriff, a constitutional sheriff's organization, Sheriff Mack, stood up for a sheriff that was removed from office because he refused to, and I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a gun charge that was really nothing at all. And he refused to persecute the guy for that. And on the basis of that, They removed that sheriff. He eventually got put back into office. But yeah, they do have the ability to take him out, and they should. We'll be right back with Larry Pratt, Gun Owners of America. Let's talk about militias. We've got Larry Pratt, Executive Director of Gun Owners of America. He wrote a book back in 1995, Safeguarding Liberty, the Constitution, and Militias. And of course, Larry, we had a teacher, as they're pushing us back, we've heard this from a lot of different teachers. Not only do they not want a uniformed police officer with an AR-15, for example, because the AR-15s are evil. They don't want any armed teachers with concealed carry. They don't trust that. One of the teachers.
So the left refers to this little thing right here as a war-making, what is it called? A war-making machine, right? Or a war-making gun or something like that. Mm-hmm. They attach the word war here. And of course, in their Bible, war is always evil. And you're never, ever, ever, ever supposed to kill anyone, even though that happens a lot, and some killing is justified. In fact, God in the Bible ordered the Israelites to kill many people, certainly if in the case of the Parkland, Florida incident, killing Nicholas Cruz before he could get to his number 17. And saving the lives of at least 1, 2, maybe 10, maybe 15 would have been definitely justified, not only under the law, but not only under secular law, but under God's law as well. And yet they call this thing evil, whereas this is basically here, no magazine here, and let's see if I can find here on the other side, anyway, the bolt is locked back, and so I think you can probably see that there's no round in the chamber. So this is an inanimate object. This is part of God's creation. Human beings sinned, and so we are into God's salvation providence, but God's creation, all things did not sin. And so this thing is neither good nor evil. It depends on whether it is in the hands of a good person or an evil person as to whether it would be used for good or for evil. But they call this an evil thing. We're talking about militias now. This is very interesting.
Sign up for this. I don't want to have a gun. Well, it's fine. Nobody's telling you. Nobody has proposed arming people against their will. But she says, I have a right to be safe. And you would agree, I think, that there is no right to be safe. And there is no right to have liberty either. We have to defend our safety. We have to defend our liberty. And so the question is, how do we effectively do it? I just had some of the staff say, what about tasers?
Okay, for some reason, we're not doing very well here.
I have a problem with tasers because I have seen them used cavalierly because...
Okay. Let's take a break and we'll come back. Hopefully we can improve our internet connection in the meantime.
There is a river where goodness flows. There is a fountain that drowns sorrow. There is an ocean.
We kind of like lost the sense of like why we were doing this, like why we were going through it, this, and kind of felt rushed because we only knew each other for about 2 months actually.
Only 1 month.
1 month? Yeah. Okay, 1 month before the matching ceremony we had. And so yeah, we started having a hard time. And so like for me, like, you get kind of fooled by Hollywood, and I think that's where my biggest trouble was because I didn't know how to be an actual good husband at that time. and how to like really work with a woman before. So Hyun really gave me clear direction. Basically, he just said like, you have to be strong, you have to be, confident in yourself and not be so worried about yourself. You have to be confident in who you are, kind of thing.
The more I had to wait, the more attacking was getting much more intense, and I was really struggling at the time. So, I could feel Satan was just trying to attack me, playing with my emotions, making me really complicated and confused. And it got to the point where it turned me very negative about the blessing. So, and that time I knew the way to overcome this situation was, just holding on to God and His words, because I don't think I'll be ever to overcome this situation alone. That time I really felt I really need God by my side. So I started doing conditions, prayer and Rima. And through that, I really realized, God was really straightforward to me and just, sending these messages to me, telling me to be thankful. I realized, God really wanted this blessing to happen.
Back to the King's Report for Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, the 9th year of Chungi, first month and 12th day by our heavenly calendar. And we're going through a video where David Knight of InfoWars interviews Larry Pratt, the Executive Director Emeritus of Gun Owners of America. Of course, Mr. Pratt attended our Sunday service on Sunday, just the day before yesterday, and the day before that on Saturday, he was the main speaker at a Thank You President Trump dinner, which was sponsored by the Sanctuary Church and a number of other organizations. And so let's go back to that video if we can. We're about halfway through it, and he's talking about militias now. I'm very interested in what he has to say about militias and about community defense. As soon as the tech team can bring that up, we will go back into that video. Doesn't look like you have it. Do you have it? Okay, yes.
Non-lethal weapons. We had a case in a school right here outside of Austin in Bastrop. There was a fight that was going on, and a school officer comes up, tasers the wrong person, by the way, and the kid falls down, and he's still in a coma after damaging his brain. Falls down on the concrete. So it can lead to the overuse of these quote-unquote non-lethal weapons, which in fact are lethal in many cases. But what is your opinion about that and about the militia?
That's a very good example of why somebody who's not on the scene is not necessarily going to make the right judgment about who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. This cop made a mistake, and he can't be sued, nor can his department be sued. So the kid and his family are without any recourse. Now, ideally, the city fathers would meet in council and defund him, just fire him. But that's, you're laughing already, of course.
Yeah, that's pretty unlikely, yeah.
Yeah, so in my dreams. But that's what people might be calling for, by the way. Even the fact that a bunch of people might call the Bastrop City Council or whatever it's called and demand that this guy be fired, that he be defunded, however it could be done. Even if it never gets done, he's going to hear the whiz of that political bullet going right by his ear. And that might be, in the future, good training to have him remember that I almost lost it. And maybe he'll be a little bit more thoughtful the next time. But you put your finger on it. Anybody coming in from the outside can make that mistake. You
That's right.
weren't there at the time the crime was initiated. It's
That's
only
right.
the victims and the people in the immediate vicinity that are likely to know who the bad guy is, and that's why arming teachers makes all the sense. Now, I've seen estimates that maybe if there were 10 or 20%, that might be a number sufficient to put the fear of God, or at least the fear of Smith and Wesson, into these bad guys. And that would be perhaps somewhat comparable to concealed carry percentages in the states generally, that when you get really a relatively small number of people known to be, not individually known, but as a group, it's known that in this state, the teachers are packing, the people are packing, you don't have these problems.
That's right.
Violent crime goes down. Utah has had this law for arming teachers. If they got a permit and they get the training, they can come into the school with their guns.
Okay,
They haven't
stop it
had
right
any
there,
of
please.
these episodes, and they don't occur in those
And just, I want to point out again, the Pew Research Institute report that I've showed a couple of times, it says that violent crime in the United States has decreased almost by half in the last 25 years. Mm-hmm. And we know that this coincides with a vast increase in the number of guns held by the civilian population in America. So this is there are many ways to demonstrate this statistically, where it shows that the more guns you have in the civilian population, the less violent crime there is. Even here, we can just compare Matamoros, Pennsylvania, with Port Jervis, New York, just across the river. Pennsylvania, people are packing, Port Jervis, fewer people, far fewer people, because the laws in New York are much stricter than they are in Pennsylvania. Well, guess which side has the higher crime rate? They do. Let's continue.
other counties around the country where this is the case. Even in Virginia, there are some universities, one I know for sure because they advertise it on their website. You are welcome to bring your concealed carry firearm. If you've got a permit, you can bring it to Liberty University. And there are others that aren't quite as upfront about it, but there's some community colleges here and there around the state that also allow it. So it can be done. It's a lot of effort involved to get it done. But we're only talking about piling up dead bodies under the present way of doing business.
That's
What could be
right.
wrong with that?
We're holding real security hostage to an agenda of gun control. That's what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And let's talk about the real solution to this, because, you know, we can look at the gun-free zones, not just the schools, but places like Chicago or Baltimore, where they have a lot of, or Washington, D.C., a lot of laws there, but we have a lot more killings there. Now, a lot of that is due to the drug wars and so forth. Nevertheless, we have the drug war across the country, and we don't have these types of shootings other places that say, well, you can go get a gun in Indiana and take it into Illinois. Well, why isn't Indiana having the same kind of problems then if you can get it there legally, right? But let's talk about the militia, because I think that's the key thing. As people are talking about arming citizens or allowing them to retain their arms, allowing them to use their arms, let's talk about the militia, because you wrote a book on this. How are armed teachers an embodiment of the militia, or if you will, more like the posse that we used to have, where the sheriff would have a group of people that he knew he could call on, and that was the old-fashioned posse comitatus, the posse of the Wild West, as we would see, and it wasn't as wild as our streets are today.
Well, the posse existed in a legal framework so that the sheriff could issue a hue and cry, and as I understand it, I think some citizens could as well. Help, I'm in danger, I need my armed neighbors to come right away. And it was actually at one time a punishable offense if you didn't respond. So A, you had to have a gun, and B, you had to respond at a time in a time of need. That was something that I think we should be looking at again. The elected officials have let this fall into disuse. They're not interested in having an armed people, because the armed people then are manifestly the sovereign. Right now,
That's right.
they don't want us armed. They don't want us being in control of the political system. They want to hire their own heat, their own cops, and that way they can argue that they're the sovereign.
Okay, let's stop it right there.
Indeed, that's the notion.
What Larry Pratt is saying right now is very, very important. He's talking about sovereignty. And he's making the point that the central government, the centralized authority, does not want citizens to have this power.
Right. Slaves,
Because
they want slaves.
That's right. They want to control the population. And remember, China put out the Chinese Communist Party put out a statement saying, well, obviously America needs to be more like us.
Yep.
And I'm sure there are people in Washington who are saying, yes. There are people who are eating it up. Yes. And China said, be like us, disarm the population and protect rights. That's what they said.
This is what the king was talking about last Sunday, where the archangel becomes the slave master.
Yes.
And Satan wants centralized control
Yes.
over the people.
That's right.
Reversal of dominion.
But that's not the spirit by which America was founded. Remember, True Father told us that in America we need to get back to our founding spirit. The founding spirit of America was that we are responsible. People who came over here from Europe did not come here expecting to be taken care of. They did not come here expecting to be taken care of. They came here realizing that they were going to be responsible for their own situation, for their own success or failure. And some of them succeeded, some of them failed, and some of them went back to Europe. Some of them died here trying to succeed. But they took responsibility for their success or failure, and they did not expect the government to guarantee their success or guarantee their safety. As was mentioned here, there is no right to safety. There is no right to liberty. Safety and liberty are things that we need to secure for ourselves, and by working at it. This is one thing that Larry Pratt is making a point here, that we be responsible for ourselves and for our neighbors. We love our neighbors. We love God, and we love our neighbor. That means that when our neighbor is in danger, when our neighbor calls out for help, I'm being attacked, I need my armed neighbors to come and help me, we go and we help them. With what? With tools. And that's the tool right there. This is the tool right there with which we help our neighbor. One of the tools, a major tool. We can have other tools depending on the situation. If someone is doing construction, they don't always use a jackhammer. Sometimes they use a small hammer. You have various tools depending on the job that needs to be done, the task at hand.
And some people falsely believe that America is invincible, that America will always enjoy its freedoms. But the fact of the matter is that almost every so-called great empire has fallen.
From within.
Yeah, from within. And it's the moral decay, it's the moving away from the founding father principles that founded this country, which has made it great over the last 250 years, that is now being eroded. And this is a central battle line right now.
Yes,
the
yes.
right of sovereignty.
Yes.
Who's going to be the master? Who's going to be the slave?
That's right. We're really fighting for the soul of America right now, for the soul of Chonigo. And Larry Pratt is a person who is standing up for God's side. He's definitely on God's side. And this is why the King is asking us to support him and support his organization, Gun Owners of America. All right, let's continue with the video.
Comes into my head when I hear somebody talk about a sovereign power. I think of the King of England and his army, or the President of France and his army. And I don't think of the people of Virginia, where I live, as being the sovereign of the Commonwealth, because we're not organized to function that way. We used to be.
Well, it is an effective counter-restraint on what the government does, just to know that the people have arms. In the same way as I drew the analogy earlier in the program to the old policy of mutual assured destruction that the U.S. and Russia had during the Cold War. We both have nuclear weapons. We don't want to use these things at all, so let's not have that kind of war at all. And if the people are armed, it is a kind of mutually assured destruction that restrains the government from doing certain things, and that's a good thing. You don't have to have a bullet come out of the barrel of a gun in order to have power come out of the barrel of a gun.
the Second Amendment really had that as its purpose. There are collateral benefits because you and I can pop a perp, we can have recreational uses of our firearms, but the notion in that Bill of Rights was these are the things that government absolutely may not do. And one of them was to grab the people's guns. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, because we want to have a well-ordered state. For the security of a free state is the way that amendment puts it. And that's not talking about a free Virginia versus King George or something. It's talking about the people of Virginia remaining free. And therefore, as sovereigns, they retain their firearms. That's a big deal. And it's the fundamental notion of how a Republican, small r, government ought to be operated. The people should be in charge if it's working properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same way that we saw the local posses under the control of a sheriff who was elected and maybe a couple of professional deputies, we also had a corps of the military that was, a small corps, but they didn't have a permanent standing army. They would have a permanent navy. They would have soldiers on those ships, but not boots on the ground. And so, that's another thing that we've lost now as we're starting to create an army of government officers in uniform and calling them law enforcement. So I see this whole thing, this debate that is now developing as to whether or not we should have armed teachers. I see this as an opportunity for us to go back and have this whole debate about the balance of power and where that needs to belong in our society.
And you've probably already touched on it earlier in the show or some other time, but this dirtbag of a sheriff in Broward County, Scott Israel, he was on CNN intoning against the very thing you were talking about, an armed people. At the time, he was concealing the fact that 4 of his little sissy boys, deputies, stood by and didn't go in, to the credit of the local police department of Coral Springs, I think it was. They went rushing in, and apparently they looked back at these deputies saying, "What are you doing?" And
exactly. We're out of time, Larry, but you nailed it. I mean, that says it all right there. Larry Pratt, gunowners.org. Go there and find out what you can do to stop the bad regulations that may be coming down the line.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Larry, and also thank you, David Knight. That was a wonderful interview.
David Knight is an excellent newscast constitutionalist.
Yes, he is. And he brought up David Knight brought up some very important issues, including the idea of militia, which is not discussed very often in America, but how there was this idea of a posse in the past in America. And again, this is part of the founding spirit of America, where we protected our neighbors. We protected our neighbors. We didn't call the cavalry to come in every time we were attacked. Sometimes they used to do that, but the idea of a militia obviously has to be trained. And training then is a part of the responsibility of the citizens to put in that time and money for training, to use your own funds to acquire the tools with which to protect, and then to learn how to use it, and then to and not only technically but also develop the mindset by which you are able to respond to the call when the time comes.
And as the King repeatedly says, it has to be based on a Judeo-Christian ethic. You need to demonstrate restraint. You'd be slow to anger.
Yes.
So all of this, whether it be the militia or the right of self-defense or your neighbor, it has to be done in a Judeo-Christian ethic.
Yes, it does. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back with our Rima after this.
There were walls between us. chains around us. By your grace we are no longer bound, no longer bound. You called me out of the grave, you called me into the light. You called my name and then my heart came alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Feel the darkness shaking, all the dead are coming back to life, back to life. You hear the song awaken, all creation singing we're alive, 'cause you're alive. You called me out of the grave, you called me into the light. You called my name and then my heart came alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. And what a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive, 'cause you're alive. And what a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive, 'cause you're alive. And what a love we found, death can't hold us down. We shout it out, we're alive, 'cause you're alive. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater, your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love awakens me. this world I'll overcome. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring like a lion. Let hope arise and make the darkness hide. My faith is dead, I need a resurrection somehow. No, I'm lost in your freedom. And this world I'll overcome. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring like a lion. He's roaring. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring like a lion. He's roaring alive. He's roaring like a lion. Let love explode and bring the dead to life. A love so bold to see a revolution somehow. Let love explode and bring the dead to life. A love so bold to bring a revolution somehow. No, I'm lost in your freedom. And this world I'll
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Back to the King's Report for Tuesday, February 27th of 2018, 9th year of Changi, first month and 12th day by the heavenly calendar. You need to grow light outside. The sun is rising earlier and earlier these days. As you look down across the Delaware River Valley and over into New Jersey with their obelisk there. High Point, I guess that's the highest point in New Jersey.
Yes.
And so they want to make it even higher by building an obelisk. All right. Okay. I'm in Acts 25 this morning with my Rima. Now when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. And Festus was a Roman procurator, which is a title of a certain officials in ancient Rome who were in charge of the financial affairs of a province or imperial governor of a minor province. So anyway, he's a Roman official. And the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and besought him and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him. So these folks were plotting to kill Paul. On the one hand, they reported him to the central authority and wanted the central authority to bring Paul to Jerusalem, but they weren't going to allow him to actually stand trial. They wanted to actually kill him on the way. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself would depart shortly thither. But Festus, by the grace of God, said, no, don't bring him to Jerusalem. I'll go there to Caesarea and deal with the situation there. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them for more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. So basically, I don't know if he realized this, but he may have saved Paul's life right there. And I think probably that was by the work of the Holy Spirit that he did so. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove.
Slander.
Slander, yes, fake news. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. And so Paul says, hey, I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't done anything against the law of the Jews. I have done nothing against the temple, nothing against Caesar. Have I offended anything at all? But Festus, willing to do the Jews' pleasure, answered Paul and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. He could appeal unto Caesar because he was a Roman citizen. And so he used that. And so eventually, of course, he makes his way to Rome, where he lives out the rest of his life. So anyway, Festus, the Jews were threatening Paul's life. They were actually plotting against Paul's life, and by the work of the Holy Spirit, his life is saved here through work of the Holy Spirit, through Festus. God works through imperfect people. God works through whoever He can. He's not biased. He's not racist. He's not sexist. He will work through any person that He can, and He does work through many different people, especially imperfect people. Because if God only worked through perfect people, He wouldn't be able to do very much at all, because there aren't very many perfect people running around. Probably zero. The answer there. So Festus was not a Christian. He was not a Jew. He was a Roman official. He was the central authority. But that's, God works with what He has. He doesn't approve of central authority. Central authority is not His idea of His kingdom. But if that's what He has, then that's what He is forced to work through. Do you have any thoughts on this passage, Greg?
Well, everybody has an original mind, so even though we are covered with sin, we do have deep inside an original mind, and fortunately that can come to the surface, can be prompted by the Holy Spirit, and people can make good decisions in that critical time. But I often think, what would, Jesus and the apostles, if they lived in our modern age with Facebook and social media and CNN, and they wouldn't have done well, because Jesus and the apostles had not only the Roman Empire against them, but they also had the chosen people. The Jewish leadership was very much against what this radical band of men were saying, and so they like the king is experiencing now, incredible opposition, and it has to be the work of God that can move the providence forward.
I'm still trying to. The way I choose the rima for the morning is that I go into the Korean Cheonseonggyeong, signed by Father. See that? And it says, "To the family of Moon Hyung-jin," and Father signed it July 17th, 2003. And I open this random, and I find a passage in the Korean, and I try to find it in the electronic copy that I have of the English translation. And for some reason, I'm having a great deal of difficulty this morning finding the finding this thing. Because I have the. Oh wait. Okay, I must. All right, let's do the Cheonseonggyeong Rima a little bit later, because somehow. Or shall we just go ahead with what I found it, and it's a good one. It's a good one.
Go ahead and just
it's
read
a good
it
one.
there.
It says that
direct translation.
All right, this is a on the spot translation. So it says that Elizabeth had her younger sister. In other words, that the Mary and Elizabeth, Mary the mother of Jesus, Elizabeth the mother of John the Baptist. Father refers to them. Father refers to Mary as being the younger sister of Elizabeth here, and in the Korean context, younger sister can be used more widely. In other words, they may have been cousins. Even among cousins, you would say you would use the term older sister, younger sister in the Korean context. And so here it says that Elizabeth by the instruction of the Holy Spirit or of heaven, had her husband have a relationship with her younger sister. In other words, had Mary, the mother of Jesus, when Mary received the revelation from the archangel Gabriel, I believe, or Michael. She went to her sister, who went to Elizabeth's house, and went to the house of Zechariah, and stayed there. And according to what Father has told us, he's referring to here, is that Mary went to the house of Zechariah, and there she had a sexual relationship with Zechariah, and Jesus was the product of that relationship between Mary and Zechariah. So the Father has taught us that Zechariah was the physical father of Jesus. Jesus was a male human being. He was a holy God and a holy man, but he was a male human being. He had X, Y chromosomes, and and that was came as a result of Mary's relationship, sexual relationship with Zechariah, and that sexual relationship between Zechariah and Mary was arranged by Elizabeth. And Father is saying that Elizabeth did this by the instruction of the Holy Spirit and of heaven. And Father goes on and he says in the second sentence, this was something that could not be done under the normal laws of Israel. So this was, what's the word? This was incest. And under the English definition of incest, that might not apply. In other words, if a man has a relationship with his sister-in-law, in other words, they're not blood, they're only related through marriage.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that qualifies under the legal definition of incest, but they were in the same family. And so certainly under, I believe under a Korean definition, under normal Korean custom and culture, that would qualify as incest, and certainly Father refers to it as incest. So Father says this was incest. Because this kind of a situation, because this kind of thing happened, the United States, which is in the position of the bride, of the Christian bride, if the United States had received the returning Lord, and I know, in the English English world, our families and followers of Reverend Samuel would often use the word Lord of the Second Advent, but I'm not sure where that came from. The Father says Cherimju, which means, Cherim means to come again, to descend again. Chu, of course, is Lord. So it's the returning Lord. The returning Lord. So if they had received the returning Lord, then if the United States had received the returning Lord as the Christian bride, then the United States would have known the path to return to heaven. Does that make sense? Would have known the path. Would have known how to return to heaven. But because the United States chased out the returning Lord, Satan became its master, and it started going in the opposite direction. And for that reason, incest and free sex became a mess in America. That's basically what Father says. This is from Father's words in volume 250 of the page 200 of the collection of Father's of sermons over the years. So anyway, I wish I could find the translation of that, the sort of the thing here, but I don't seem to be able to find it right offhand. But anyway, that's my on-the-spot translation. So it's very interesting that we were talking about America and the need for America to return to its founding spirit. At the Madison Square Garden in 1974 and in other places in the whole, that was Father's theme when he first came to America, that America needs to repent and return to its founding spirit, because he taught that America was founded by the guidance of God and in the context of God's providence of salvation, that God created this country to have a very important role in His providence of salvation, and God brought people from all over the world. Think about it. I don't know if a study has actually been done, but I don't think there is a single ethnic group in the world that is not represented or has never been represented in America. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think every single ethnic group in the world has at least one representative in America. Mm-hmm. That's probably a pretty safe statement.
I think so.
So this is really a unique country in the history of humanity in that sense. And it's not a coincidence that America was formed in this way. But it was formed, although many people came from all over the world, literally all over the world, from every ethnic group and every religion and every culture, still God made sure that the foundation of America was the Judeo-Christian foundation. Mm-hmm. And that strong and firm foundation was the Judeo-Christian foundation. And unfortunately, since the 1960s, especially since the 1960s, America has taken prayer out of the schools and progressively has taken religion and especially Christianity out of the public forum. And look where it's gotten us. Look where it's gotten us. You know, people, some Harvard professor of all people was asking, where was God during the recent school shooting in Parkland, Florida. And one way to respond to that is that, well, God was chased out of the schools, and now look what you have. But as Father said, if America had received the returning Lord, we would have known the path for returning to heaven. But even now, God has not given up on America. God still is starting His providence, His providence of goodness, providence of salvation, the providence of the Chonyukuk here in America, centering on the second king of Chonyukuk. And so, the fact that we have True Father's direct son here in America is an incredible blessing. It's as if Jesus' son had been his disciple and had carried on his mission. Yeah. Yes, in that in God's family and lineage could have been planted 2,000 years ago. That's what's happening today, and so we need to protect that lineage and to center ourselves on that lineage, unite with that lineage, so that God can lead us back to heaven. Take it away.
Yeah, I feel the same, that we're very fortunate. America is the last bastion of hope for the world. Everywhere around the world we see freedoms eroding, and that's why it's so important we go back to the Founding Fathers and understand that does come from a Judeo-Christian foundation. And the King is really the returning, almost the same as when Jesus was resurrected at the time of his crucifixion. He rose, and it was because of that resurrection the apostles gathered strength and courage at that time to fight to their death. Most of them died on the cross, upside down, stabbed, stoned, but they had the kind of conviction after the resurrection of Jesus, and now the second king is like the resurrected true Father. Even though Father is not dead, he's alive and well through the second king, and God is conducting his providence now through Father, through the second king, and it's through this providence that the kingdom of heaven will be established. And what's happening right now, this frontline battle between sovereignty and slavery, is really the lines in the sand have been drawn. Are you going to be a king and queen of royal lineage? Are you going to stand for sovereignty with the rod of iron? Or are you going to just give it all up and become a nice, peaceful slave? That's the question. Yeah. Where do you stand?
Yeah. Where do you stand? Yes. Yes. Are you going to... a slave is safe.
Yeah.
He eats what he is given to eat. He wears what he is given to wear. He sleeps where he is told to sleep. And he does what he is told to do. And in return, the master, because he values the slave's manual labor,
tax
or
dollars,
whatever, whatever the slave produces for him,
right,
preserves that slave as long as he is able to keep adding value to the master. But God made us to be free. God made us to be free, and we have this innate desire to be free. And this is the thing that the central control people can never extinguish, and that's why their plan can never succeed. George Soros's plan can never succeed. The EU, the European Union, can never succeed because it goes against that innate desire for freedom that is in all of us. And so more and more people are going to wake up and rebel against that. They're going to resist. We are the resistance. We are the resistance against that kind of satanic central control.
Aju.
Aju. All right, let's take another break, and we'll come back with more news from a Chonyukuk perspective.
here at the range today. I just learned a new technique from the father of the .44 Magnum, Elmer Keith, which is called shooting out of the notch, which allows you to make really long distance shots and still have an extremely precise sight picture. So I brought my CW9 car down, and with this little gun, we're gonna shoot this little munchkin at 200 yards up in the hills, applying this technique, and hopefully we'll make the shot. To apply this technique, instead of using the blade of the front sight lined up with the top of the rear sight, I'm going to take the dot of the front sight and raise it up so that it's out of the notch, but I'm still going to keep the front sight on my target. Bringing that front sight up like that is going to compensate for the bullet drop over that excessively long distance with just this little gun. So if applied right, we should be making contact. Let's see how it goes. I saw this shot, so I'm a little bit out of breath because you gotta run to make sure that is what I thought it was, and it was. So while making this shot, from that distance with these white dot sights, it literally would cover the entire target. You couldn't see what you were shooting. So using the Elmer Keith technique, you were able to raise it out of the back notch. I can't breathe. Out of the back notch, allowing you to keep your accuracy, aim, and also still see the target, which is key because it was a hard shot, not gonna lie. But yeah, it went great, and Elmer knows what he's talking about. And for such a small gun to be able to take that hit, I'm very impressed with this. All right, guys, be sure to like and share, and I'll see you out on the range.
That was awesome. Hey, can I try that one? Yeah, let's do it with the 380. Does everybody have eyes and ears?
Welcome back to the King's Report for Tuesday, February 27th, 9th year of Chungi's first month and the 12th day by the heavenly calendar, the day before the great, wonderful blessing ceremony that's going to be held with our AR-15s and our crowns. We're not blessing the guns, all right? If anybody out there is listening who's not yet clear on this, we're not. These guys, they never fell, they never committed sin, all right? So they don't need to be blessed. We, however, human beings, we did commit sin. We have original sin. We are in the process of going through this providence of salvation that's been going on since the beginning of history. Anyway, I will explain all of that during the ceremony tomorrow. But it's this that's being blessed, not this. Let's be clear about that.
Come on, it's so much more exciting to be blessing guns.
I know, and that's why I say, that headline. And I was going through the actually for today's Korean service, the king instructed me to put together all the press coverage that we've gathered, and going through. I think it was Fox News. I think it's Fox.
Are they the ones that started that?
I think they were the ones that started that, according to my.
Research.
It's not a comprehensive research.
To that
So I don't know if it was balanced, but I don't think it was fair. But anyway, thanks for the clickbait because we certainly got a lot of coverage as a result of that. And fortunately,
people are stopping by. Every day at the church, people are stopping by and say, "Hey, we're with you guys. We know this is much more than about blessing of the guns." We had a wonderful couple stop by last night from the Milford area, and just a wonderful conversation. And they understand what's going on.
Okay.
So fake news alert.
But please don't bring your guns to be blessed.
That's right.
That's not what's happening. I think that comes from the sort of the Catholic. I think the Pope blesses things, or priests bless inanimate objects, don't they?
And the blessing of the boats, for example, in the Navy.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of blessing of inanimate objects that you want that item to receive special grace and blessing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's not a totally horrible thing.
I see. Okay.
In fact, Cook to him said, "Hey, it's not a bad thing to have your gun blessed by the king."
But that's not what's happening tomorrow. All right.
That's maybe a secondary or a third
maybe
thing
secondary.
happening.
But, we'll talk to the king if he wants to at another occasion, whether he wants people to bring their guns and so that they can be blessed by the king. We'll talk to the king about that. But that's not what's happening tomorrow. Maybe that can be arranged at some future day, but not tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll explain that I'll be the MC, and so I will. In fact, the king has instructed me to do. Usually, we do it all in Korean, but he has instructed me to do the important parts in English, where I'm going to be sort of explaining stuff, because I think we're going to have a somewhat wider audience than normal.
A strong media presence, let's say.
A strong media presence. One of the papers in London actually is sending. I think someone is actually flying over here for this specific event. That's the impression I get. Mm-hmm. They may be covering other stories as well, but they're flying over today, I think, to attend this event tomorrow, and they were asking, is there going to be a lot of media there? I said, we've had a few inquiries.
I don't know if there's going to be any room for our normal brothers and sisters, our regular congregants. The entire large sanctuary might be filled with media.
Praise God. I don't know. Anyway, God is in charge. We have lost control a long time ago. We have definitely, it is out of our hands. That is definitely the case. We'll see. But one thing we will be doing, though, is making absolutely sure that everyone handles their weapons safely. And as the king already went over on Sunday, and I went over this earlier than that as well, but the king especially emphasized go back to the Sunday sermon that is on YouTube. I believe it is on YouTube, right? And he goes through the about 7 points that were made on the slide there. But one thing is that the guns will be unloaded. You can see that this is unloaded here. It has no magazine here. Right now the bolt here is forward, so I'm going to pull it back and I'm going to lock it in the open position. So if here there's no, I can put my finger in there and see that there is no round in there. So this is unloaded, and then there's going to be a zip tie through this position here, so that even if it somehow happened to be loaded, it would still be inoperable. And people are being asked to make sure that they keep their muzzles pointed up. Muzzles always pointed up. Don't fall asleep. All right. Don't try to pick up something. If you drop something, just I don't know. But anyway, whatever you do, well, husband and wife are going to share a gun. It's one gun per couple. So if you drop something, ask your wife to pick it up for you or something like that. But don't go. Always be aware of where your muzzle is pointed. It should always be pointed up. All right, and never touch the trigger. No fingers on the trigger. Never touch the trigger, because even though I am 100%, I am 1,000% certain that this gun is unloaded. See, I'm 1,000%. I can stick my finger in there, and I'm 1,000%. But still, I'm treating it as if it were loaded. Okay, so that's
rule number one.
That is the first rule of gun safety, and that is what we're going to be doing tomorrow. We're going to be following the rules of gun safety. We're not going to point it at anything that we do not want to destroy, and we're going to keep our fingers off of the trigger. So that is one thing that we are maintaining a great deal of control over, and we will have, of course, security on hand. But we are our own first responders. We are our own first responders, and so if anyone sees something, if someone starts to take off their zip tie, or someone takes a round out of their pocket and starts putting it in the chamber, everyone.
Sheepdogs will attack.
That is a highly unlikely event. But in that highly unlikely possibility that does happen, we will certainly handle it in the appropriate way. And so everybody's going to be safe. Everyone's going to be safe.
This is an incredible demonstration of sovereignty.
Yes.
And that's really the point of having this type of accoutrement in a ceremony of this nature,
Yes.
is to show the importance of sovereignty and that we are the royal kings and queens of the coming kingdom.
Yes. Okay, let's go through some of the
China?
other news. Speaking
wanna-
of mankind's innate... oh, did I say something sexist? Did I say mankind? Speaking of the men and women's innate desire for freedom, of course, President of Xi Jinping of China has decided to give himself a lifetime appointment. Boy, didn't see that coming.
This is the model for the world.
Yes. And now the people in China are reacting against that. I wonder why.
Good luck with that. Reacting
yeah.
against it.
See, yeah, but
Let's see what happens.
People have this innate desire for freedom. I'm sorry, Mr. Xi.
goodness.
If God didn't exist, if God doesn't exist, you're okay. You have got nothing to worry about. If God doesn't exist, of course, he believes that God does not exist, so he believes that he has nothing to worry about. But we shall see. China's propaganda machine kicked into overdrive Tuesday to defend the Communist Party's move to scrap term limits for President Xi Jinping as critics on social media again defied censorship attempts. The country has shocked many observers by proposing shocked? Really? Many observers? Who are these observers that were shocked? Where have they been? By proposing a constitutional amendment to end the two-term limit for presidents, giving Xi a clear path to rule the world's second largest economy for life. The rubber-stamped National People's Congress is certain to endorse the move next week, meaning that Xi, already China's most powerful leader in decades, can stay as president beyond 2023. Li Daitong, a former editor at the state-run China Youth Daily, posted a draft letter urging legislators to vote against the move, which would abolish term limits set in 1982 under Deng Xiaoping to prevent a return to the decades of chaos under Mao Zedong.
The whole thing is laughable. If you oppose this, you will be taken away.
Yes.
This is communist China.
Yes, it is.
It is not a free democratic China.
Absolutely not. This is where they disarm you and protect your rights. It is the highest and most effective legal restriction meant to prevent autocracy or putting individuals above the party and the state, said the letter. It was not sent to legislators but shared with hundreds of people in a private group on China's WeChat phone messaging app. Lifting the term limits of national leaders will be ridiculed by civilized nations all over the world and also sow the seeds of chaos for China, said the text posted on Monday. WeChat users trying to share screenshots of the letter saw their post blocked. Censors have scrambled to delete all dissenting comments on social media. Even the word disagree is blocked. But users of the Twitter-like Weibo website kept speaking out Tuesday, 2 days after the party's Central Committee announcement. So pathetic. We have 1.3 billion people. No one can resist, wrote one user. Remember what happened in, 1989, right? The Tiananmen massacre, what happened there. Was that 80? I believe that was about 89, yes. Another lamented the lack of political reform. I once believed that I could see a president elected by one man, one vote in my lifetime. Scores of terms have been blocked, according to a list of dozens of words compiled by U.S.-based internet tracker China Digital Times, including "My Emperor," "Ascend the Throne," "I Oppose," "Lifelong," and "Winnie the Pooh." The portly cartoon bear to which she has been compared. There's I don't know if we need to take the time to find it, but there's an interesting cartoon of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger the Tiger walking together. And this is Xi Jinping and Barack Obama. Anyway, we don't need to take the time to find that. But anyway, it's out there. Happier Lives, the poor Winnie the Pooh. You know, all he wants to do is eat his honey at what is it, 3 o'clock was it, or 5 o'clock?
And he gets compared to the dictator
I know,
of China.
I know.
That's really unfair.
That's really unfair.
Doesn't he have rights?
Yeah. Poor Winnie. The NPC at its annual fall session is nothing sacred. At its annual fall session starting Monday, the NPC, that's the National, what is that, the People's Committee or something? Forgotten now, it was up here. Anyway, it's the rubber stamp
National
body.
People's Congress.
National People's Congress. Anyway, the state media defended the amendment in editorials that lavished praise on the Communist Party's overall leadership. The English language China Daily said the lifting of the presidential term limit, quote, has been necessitated by the need to perfect the party and the state leadership system.
Didn't they say the same thing about Mao?
They're on the perfection level!
Wasn't Mao also praised as a revolutionary leader of the time? And how many millions did he kill? 80?
Yeah,
80
yeah,
million?
through his great leap forward,
great
through
leap.
his cultural revolution.
What could possibly go wrong, Tim,
What could possibly go wrong?
of this?
But it's interesting
move?
that they are going now to the perfection level. Nah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, micro, macro.
Yes, to perfect and I don't know what I would like to know, because I've always had a problem with the translation into English of the Korean term wansong. I believe it should be translated as completion rather than perfection. So I would like to know what exactly the Chinese term was used, which Chinese characters were used, whether it actually said perfect or to complete. Anyway, perhaps someone who is able to send that to me, I'd appreciate it if you could. The party has always proposed amendments that have, quote, injected new ideas and concepts about where the country will go and how it will achieve its goal of rejuvenation and ensure people live happier lives.
Yes, a happier slave life.
A happier slave.
Yes.
A more satisfied slave.
Yes.
See?
Yep.
That's it. That's it. The Global Times, a nationalist tabloid, was even more profuse in its praise of the amendment in an editorial titled Constitution Change Responds to New Era. Since Xi took power, it wrote, the new ruling team has not just been muddling along under the leadership of General Secretary Xi Jinping. Instead, it quickly started to deepen reforms in a comprehensive and magnificent way. See, he's president of the country, but he's General Secretary of the party. And actually, being General Secretary of the party is where all the power is.
Yeah.
But being president of the country is not so powerful. The newspaper took a shot at the political systems of the United States and Europe, and this is what communists and other dictators have always done. Look how much confusion there is in America.
Yeah.
They're always on the verge of falling apart. And yet, the Soviet Union, where on today's map do you find the word Soviet Union? You don't.
That's right.
It fell. You know, they always mocked our society about how much confusion there was, how much opposition there was, and how orderly they were. And yet, on today's map, you do not see the words Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. That is no. And in the Olympics, you do not see teams with the CCCP, I think were written across there on their uniforms, because they're gone. Because God creates us with an innate desire for freedom, and those who deny it are doomed to fall away. You know, where's the Roman Empire today? Yeah, you know, there's no Roman Empire today.
That's right.
Yeah, all those empires and countries that went against Judeo-Christianity have all fallen away.
And they all tried to silence the freedom speakers.
That's right.
And it ultimately did not work. And you can see this in China, you know, through social media. And actually, they're trying to do that in the United States with any kind of conservative thought to silence the critics.
Yes.
This is not unique just to China; it's happening here.
Yes.
And we have to be very vigilant,
Yes. Vigilant.
not to have censorship here.
Yes. And let's see what it says about America. It has shaped and affected quite a few Chinese people's mindsets. Well, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to affect you. But some key parts of the Western value system are collapsing. Democracy, which has been explored and practiced by Western societies for hundreds of years, is ulcerating. Okay, so now the 20th Constitution also calls for a king.
Yeah.
And that is also a lifetime thing. But it is not a all-powerful position as the president of China is, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party is. In fact, it is a very severely limited position in the Chinese
And it's centered on God, whereas the Communist Party is not centered on God.
Right.
Huge difference.
That there's all kinds of limitations to the king's power in the Constitution of the United States of Cheongguk, which you will find online if you're interested. China cannot stop and take a break. Our country must not be disturbed by the outside world or lose our confidence as the world's West grows increasingly vigilant toward China. Well, thank you for noticing. The administration of President Donald Trump, who has called Xi a friend but regularly clashes with Beijing over trade, had a guarded reaction to the Communist Party's move. The president has talked about term limits in a number of capacities during the campaign, and something that he supports here in the United States. But that's a decision up to China, said White House spokesman Sarah Sanders. Yes, in the Cheongguk Constitution, aside from the king, who decides his own term, or is decided by God how long he will live, but other than that, federal elected officials are limited to 12 years. Even the Supreme Court justices are limited to 12 years. The senators are limited to two terms of 6 years each. Members of the House are limited to 6 terms of 2 years each. And the president, I think, is 8 years, if I recall correctly. Just 8 years of 2 terms of 4 years each. But there are term limits in the Constitution of the United States of Cheongguk. Okay, so that is China. They're moving to the perfection level, as they say.
Very interesting terminology.
Yes, they're trying to perfect their
What's
leadership.
happening tomorrow? Perfection level blessing.
Yes, but again, perfection level. The one song. Is this a perfect phone?
No.
Why?
Well, yeah, it fulfills its purpose.
Well, that's the point. But it's not, is it? Because always someone's trying to create something that is better than this.
But it does
Right.
fulfill its fundamental purpose.
So it is a complete phone.
Complete phone, yeah.
In the sense that, if I were to take the battery out, it would be incomplete.
Yeah.
Or if I were to take another part out of it,
Or if you smashed it.
or if I smashed it, it would be incomplete.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a completed phone, but it is not a perfect phone. Isn't that right? To say something's perfect, I think, sort of means that it's gone as far as it can go. I don't know.
I guess we could have a debate about that.
Yes. Solution. Let's all learn Korean. Okay. All right. Oscars. What's happening? Drudge, for some reason, put Oscars at the giving the main headline to the Oscars, which are when? A couple of days, or what is it? Tomorrow? Aren't they the end of February? Anyway, apparently, industry figures have tried to strike a reflective, humble tone in light of a glut of recent controversies that have dogged Hollywood. Well, humility in Hollywood, that is news. That is news.
Is that picture transgender human beings, or are those males? Why are they all males?
He's holding something in front of himself so as to hide.
It's a sword. It's a sword.
It's a sword, yes.
Interesting. It's a rod of iron,
Yes,
perhaps?
but I think that is the traditional Oscar statue, as far as I can. Is it the rod of iron?
It might be the rod of iron.
That could be the rod of iron, yes.
But they look male. Why is this being allowed?
They could be
transgender.
The broad shoulders, narrow hips, that does look male, doesn't it?
That seems very sexist.
The cheekbones, it looks very sexist. All right. So anyway, they're doing something in Hollywood. Let's see, Trump to examine wall prototypes in California. I believe he's going there in March. The Supreme Court upheld the lower courts, or actually let stand is the proper term, the lower courts lower courts denial of the Trump administration wanting to. Well, let's see. Let's go in here. In a blow to Trump, Supreme Court won't hear appeal of DACA ruling. Washington Supreme Court the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday declined to hear the Trump administration's appeal of a federal judge's ruling that requires the government to keep the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program going. For now, this is not a final thing. They just wanted the lower court ruled this way, and so anyway, let's go through the article. It explains better than I can. Under a lower court order that remains in effect, the Department of Homeland Security must continue to accept renewal applications from the roughly 700,000 young people who are currently, some of them not so young, who are currently enrolled in the program known as DACA. It's the Delayed Action for Childhood Arrivals. The administration had intended to shut the program down by March 5th, but that deadline is now legally meaningless. In a brief order, the Supreme Court simply said it is assumed the Court of Appeals will act expeditiously to decide this case. So, in other words, the Supreme Court just decided not to short circuit, decided not to go through the fast track on this. They're going to let the thing go through the process, and then they're going to look at it when it gets to them again. Monday's denial also gives Congress more time to come up with a legislative solution, though repeated bipartisan efforts have failed so far. And it doesn't look like they're going to get 60 votes on anything on that in the Senate, unless some miracle happens. At a White House meeting with governors from around the country, President Donald Trump said the court's decision, we'd like to help DACA, and criticized the lower court. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, California, said today's Supreme Court action shows that restricting DACA was not only legally questionable, but also unjust and cruel. Well, it doesn't say anything about that anyway. It just says that the Supreme Court wants the normal process to go forward. The court's action is welcome news, but only Congress can provide the permanent protection our dreamers need and deserve. So why was it then that this was done not by Congress in the first place? It was done by executive action by the president, who was which man at that time? Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
Yes, you're missing your cue.
Sorry.
Barack Obama just did this by executive action. All right? Congress should have acted in the first place, but they didn't. The Supreme Court's denial Monday was expected because the justices rarely accept appeals asking them to bypass the lower courts. So, it doesn't mean all the things that Pelosi says it means. It just means that the Supreme Court wants the process to go the normal course. The program allows children of illegal immigrants, known as Dreamers, to remain here if they were under 16 when their parents brought them to the U.S. and if they arrived by 2007. Those given DACA status must renew it every 2 years. On January 9th, a federal judge in San Francisco ruled in favor of the University of California and its president, former Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. They sued under Obama. They sued to keep the program going after the Trump administration said in September that it would end it within 6 months. The University of California said Attorney General Jeff Sessions had wrongly concluded that DACA was put in place without proper legal authority. Well, so the court will decide that. And, did the president at that time, Barack Obama, have the right to do this? The Justice Department said they would contest that ruling before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in California, but government lawyers also asked the Supreme Court to take the highly unusual step of agreeing to hear the case, bypassing this appeals court. The district court has entered an unprecedented nationwide injunction requiring the government not simply to tolerate, but to affirmatively sanction a continuing violation of federal law by nearly 700,000 aliens, said Solicitor General Noel Francisco in asking the justices to take the case. The Solicitor General is basically the government's official lawyer. That's the guy that goes to the Supreme Court to argue the government's case in almost all cases. After the Supreme Court's decision Monday, the White House said, quote, the DACA program, which provides work permits and myriad government benefits to illegal immigrants en masse, is clearly unlawful. The district judge's decision to unilaterally reimpose a program that Congress had explicitly and repeatedly rejected is a usurpation of legislative authority. We look forward to having this case expeditiously heard by the appeals court and, if necessary, the Supreme Court, where we fully expect to prevail. And they're probably right. The Supreme Court has agreed only about a dozen times in the past century to immediately take a case and bypass the federal appeals courts, and those cases usually involve a national emergency, such as a nationwide strike in the steel and coal industries. In asking the court to take the case, the Justice Department took another unusual step in deciding to ask the justices to block the lower court order in the meantime, which would have allowed the government to shut DACA down as planned. Such a start and stop approach, the government said, would frustrate the goal of winding the program down in an orderly way. Monday's action by the Supreme Court leaves the DACA challenge pending before the California Appeals Court, where it is in the early stages. The Justice Department has said it will take at least another year to get back to the Supreme Court for a decision on the DACA's future. If Congress acts in the meantime to extend the program or provide an alternative path to citizenship for its recipients, the legal case would probably be dismissed. So, the wheels of justice turn slowly. The government tried to make them turn a little bit faster, but the Supreme Court said no. We're going to do this slowly, and that's all it means. But it means that the DACA program will be in place, it looks like, for at least another year. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back after this with more news from a Choni Group perspective.
Give me your heart, give me your song, sing it with all your might. Come to the fountain and you can be satisfied. There is a peace, there is a love, you can get lost inside. Come to the fountain. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring like a lion. Let hope arise and make the darkness hide. My faith is dead, I need a resurrection somehow. No, I'm lost in your freedom. And this world I'll overcome. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring like a lion. He's roaring. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. My God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Let heaven roar and fire fall. Come shake the ground with the sound of revival. Our God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, roaring like a lion. He's roaring, he's roaring like a lion. He's roaring, he's roaring, he's roaring, he's roaring like a lion.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, 9th year of Cheonggye, first month and 12th day by the heavenly calendar. Tim Elder and Greg Noll in for the second king of Cheonggye, Hyung Moon. And we're going through the news right now from a Cheonggye perspective, and we have a case here in Denver, I guess, in the Denver area anyway. It's in the Denver Post, where defense attorneys hint at blaming acne drug to defend Longmont teen charged with murder. You know, a lot of us had acne problems when we were younger, and some of us still have it, but we didn't murder anybody. So anyway, I think we tried all sorts of acne drugs at the time. So it's interesting that this guy wants to, this 15-year-old, apparently he's charged with first-degree murder and 10 other counts in the stabbing death of a person. Okay, are you able to get this article, Greg?
Well, I think it talks about how drug, and it's a much larger story than just this one isolated story in Denver, where this attorney wants to use the side effects of this acne drug that cause erotic behavior. Erratic, sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Probably erotic too. Erratic behavior may be cited by the defense in explaining the teen's alleged actions. And, the bigger story is how pharmaceutical drugs are, I think it's like 35 different actions of violence in school shootings and violence have been related to SSRI drugs, antidepressant drug. So the bottom line is these pharmaceutical drugs, which are really, they're never cited. That's why this is a significant case. They're never cited as a partial cause for this kind of violent behavior. But in reality, if you look at the statistics, you can see that these antidepressant drugs are often found being used by the killers, or they're on some kind of withdrawal from these very, very toxic drugs. And the reason you'll never hear about it is because obviously I think it's like over 90% of funding for news agencies come from pharmaceutical companies. So it's not in their interest, it's not in their financial survival to report on the relationship between pharmaceutical drugs and violent behavior. And this is something I think the Cruz guy down in Florida was also on SSRI drugs. And it's something that this court case is going to be interesting to follow because if they can actually make a link between pharmaceuticals and violent behavior, then this can open the way to expose the collusion between mainstream media, pharmaceutical companies, and the government. And this is a monopoly that needs to be broken up. This is a monopoly that is causing untold pain and suffering for many, many people. And there's another article in the Daily Mail that goes into how fruits and vegetables actually help depression much more effectively than pharmaceutical antidepressants. So, God already has it figured out that food is medicine. Herbs and the like can actually help people much better than a synthetic counterpart that actually causes havoc in the delicate ecosystem of our body. So this is something I hope somehow through alternative media, and certainly the Health Ranger and others are bringing this to light. But it's something that everybody should absolutely make a commitment to stay away from these harmful pharmaceutical drugs and eat more fruits and vegetables.
Yes, thank you for that. Shall we go on?
Yeah.
Okay, in London, it's snowing, apparently. If you can bring up my screen there. A guy in London, or I guess in somewhere, I think in southeast England, where it is, where it was snowing and they're cleaning off their cars there. So all sorts of snow. So we're having a warmer than usual temperature here, but obviously in England that's not the case. So it's all balancing out. The Hill says the right warns the GOP agenda can't stop at the Trump's tax law. So the top conservatives have a message for GOP leadership. Tax cuts alone won't stave off a Democratic wave in November. While they have disagreements about what should come next on the 2018 agenda, conservatives say Republicans need to keep their foot on the gas pedal. That means continuing to push bold new legislation on things like infrastructure, criminal justice reform, and pharmaceutical reform, but not gun control. While also selling their historic tax overhaul that Trump signed into law in December. The warnings from conservatives come as a new CNN poll found that 54% of registered voters said they would back a Democrat in their congressional district this year, while 38% say they would support a Republican. The new figures mark a shift toward Democrats. In January, Democrats led Republicans on the generic ballot by just 5 points, 49 to 44, following the GOP's tax cuts becoming law. History shows it's a very difficult cycle in general for Republicans, the party in power, but especially for the House, said Tim Phillips, president of the conservative outside group Americans for Prosperity, who has been sounding the alarm about possible blue wave in November. Blue wave meaning a large Democratic victory. If the Republicans lose a net 24 seats, we'll have Nancy Pelosi back as Speaker, which is a terrible thought for anybody who wants freedom and prosperity and the economy to keep moving forward, he said.
We should reread that because everybody has to understand Nancy Pelosi will be the House Speaker.
Yes.
If the Democrats win.
But good news, she still doesn't know that Trump is president. She thinks it's still Bush.
All the more reason.
All the more. The GOP leaders need to keep driving bold policy and policy victories that are significant, he added. Both Phillips and Representative Mark Walker, Republican of North Carolina, chairman of the Conservative Republican Study Committee, are urging leadership to press forward with criminal justice reform. A Baptist preacher, Walker believes many of America's systemic social problems, including poverty and what he sees as the breakdown of the traditional family, stem from a broken justice system paralyzed by high incarceration and recidivism rates. America has per capita the highest incarceration rate in the world.
That's big business.
Yes. Of course, China keeps its rate down by executing them all. But anyway, it's still it's terrible that we have so many people in prison, so much of our population in prison, especially the African American population, and in many cases, these are non-violent crimes for people to be in prison, being in prison. And Jeff Sessions has been a disappointment on a number of aspects, but his emphasis on the drug war is one of those ways in which he has disappointed us. I think he's, marijuana and other drugs should be, we need to take a libertarian approach to that. If people are dumb enough to put that stuff in their bodies, they should suffer the consequences. But don't give them welfare, all right?
Right.
Right. If they if they're overdosing and stuff like that, they are suffering the consequences of their own actions. And I think it's, I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't realize that these drugs can be dangerous. But what it does is it puts a lot of people in prison, and it also keeps us from dealing with the situation in a way that is appropriate to the specific person. You know, we had our commissioner in here, county commissioner in here, who was talking about how you cannot. What's the name of that? The antidote to the
Fentanyl?
Not to the fentanyl overdose. The antidote is.
Oh yeah, right.
You cannot go into the pharmacy to get that, even if you have a doctor's prescription, because if you're getting it for your husband or your wife or your child, then your insurance will be affected. It's it's not readily available, even though it should be. So yeah, the war on drugs is not working.
Well, what happens a lot of times is these young adults go into the criminal system with a non-violent offense, and then they get trained by very violent offenders, and they come out more hardened, more hardcore, and committed to a life of crime than when they went in.
So the justice system is broken.
Yeah.
I don't know how sexy that's going to be to hear. It's not a red meat thing, Walker told The Hill, but those issues need to be talked about by Republicans. Yes.
I think farms in prisons is a good thing. Animals, having inmates relate to animals and green plants and fresh air, and learning practical agricultural skills and woodworking skills, all those kinds of things, I think, should be promoted in the prisons. Right now, they just stay in a confined situation. They maybe go out and play basketball, lift weights, which makes them stronger, bigger criminals when they come out. But really, to interact with nature, interact with the natural world is the best way to bring healing to a dysfunctional situation.
There were prison farms in the past where...
Different purpose, though.
Yeah.
Slave labor more than anything else.
Yes.
I'm talking about a different kind of using the therapy of nature to bring healing, not for a work quota.
Okay.
It's a different...
If you make it too good, people may want to go to prison.
Fresh fruits and vegetables. Again, you look at prison food, back to the food. Prison food is like hospital food. It's horrible.
Okay.
It actually does not promote health. Isn't it ironic that in a hospital you get fed processed foods, which actually hurts your health? And the same thing in prisons. They're fed all the GMO foods, all the government contracts that hospitals, schools, prisons have with the government, for GMO corn and corn products, corn syrup. All this stuff creates anxiety and creates more depression, more a weakened immune system. So it's a broken system on multiple fronts.
Speaker Paul Ryan has promised for months that Congress would act to ease the threat of deportation for hundreds of thousands of immigrants who came to the U.S. illegally as children. We covered that. And in the aftermath of the Florida school shooting, President Trump is now demanding Congress take action on gun restrictions, including expanding background checks. Yeah, those issues, immigration and gun control, won't play well with the conservative base, and they could crowd a quickly diminishing midterm election year calendar. The House shortened its current work week so that the Reverend Billy Graham, who recently died, could lie in honor in the Capitol Rotunda. Last week, both House and the Senate were on recess. Not all conservatives are on the same page. However, when asked what Republicans should tackle next in year 2 of the Trump presidency, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows, who is close to Trump, said the president's $200 billion infrastructure plan will probably be the next big ticket item that the congressional Republicans tackle. Wait a second. Suddenly went from $1.5 trillion to $200 billion. So, whoa! Of course, from the beginning, Trump was saying that out of the $1.5 trillion, the government would provide $200 billion. And the rest he wanted to be state and local governments and the private enterprise. State and local governments are saying, right.
Where's that going to come from?
Yes, we were wondering what we were going to do with all that cash we had lying around.
You guys have the ability to print money, we don't.
Yes. Places like Illinois that can't even pay their current bills,
right?
What are they going to do?
Every state actually is mostly
especially Illinois.
Right.
But Meadows, a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, said he'd like to see that plan coupled with legislation to make the tax laws, temporary tax cuts for individuals, permanent. We need to turn to make the tax cuts permanent. I think you'll see a vote in the House floor by April 15th, which is tax day, Meadows said in a brief interview. I think everybody believes they need to put in a full day's work, Meadows said, on the broader 2018 agenda. That means that doesn't mean that they coast between now and November. Former Representative Tim something or other echoed Meadows on that point. Republicans can't grow complacent. Things are moving too quickly to think you can just sit here for 9 or 10 months and do nothing, said this man who is now president of the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank in Illinois. I mean, they might end up doing nothing, but it's a new world. People are demanding more. Pressure to act is coming from conservative grassroots activists as well. Phoenix City Councilman Sal DiCiccio, Trump Party Republican and Trump supporter, was, hey, I speak Japanese and Korean, but none of this, other stuff, right? Italian or whatever. I'm sorry. Was one of the attendees of this week's Conservative Political Action Conference who urged lawmakers to stay on offense. In the China Constitution, most stuff takes place at the local level. Yes. You don't have a situation like this where we have the people in Washington thinking, we got to do something, we got to do something, we got to do something. No, it's all going to happen at the local level. Most of it's going to happen at the local level. And there will be so many members of the House, it'll be so unwieldy that you can't really do very much at the federal level anyway.
Praise God.
And that's good.
Yeah.
We got one representative for every 2,100 population. All right. So what is 2,100 into 34? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 34 million. All right. No, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. I should have done it the other way. Okay. 34, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 2,100 is 16,190 members of the House of Representatives for the U.S. population alone. And if it's a worldwide thing, then you can imagine, boom, you're never going to get anything done, which is a good thing. Right? And all laws will expire after 10 years. And if you want them renewed, then you have to actually make the effort to renew them. So things are going to take place at the local level. And different local areas will try different things. Some will be successful, some not. And so that people can learn from the successes and from the failures.
Yes. The kingdom of God is all about decentralization.
Yes.
And the founding fathers knew that. That's why they didn't. That's why they gave the states the rights and not the federal government.
Yes.
The federal government, when that becomes the master of everything, then that's the decline of a civilization.
Yes. They defined certain rights of the federal government in the Constitution, and then in the 10th Amendment, they said everything else belongs to the people and to the states. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that 10th Amendment has become a dead letter today, and everything is centralized in the federal government. But fortunately, thank you, California. California is bringing back the 10th Amendment. They're bringing back states' rights.
God is somehow working through that situation.
Absolutely. Hey, God works through imperfect people, like I said. And so California is fighting to bring back states' rights.
Now the federal government wants to tell you cannot homeschool your children.
Yeah.
This is a society.
Federal government?
Yeah.
The federal government is trying to say that?
Well, states are trying to tell that, as well as I think in Germany, for example.
Oh, in Germany, yes.
That's the federal bureaucracy is saying you cannot do it. And in fact, you're a criminal if you do. Your children can be taken away from you.
Yes.
And that actually has happened in Germany.
Republicans will vote for a gas tax increase and give back 60% of the tax cuts they just passed. That's not going to happen, he said. That's good because in Pennsylvania, we already have the highest gas tax in the country. Instead of infrastructure, this man said Republicans should take up legislation by Senator Ron Johnson that would give terminally ill patients the right to try experimental drugs that have not yet been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. The bill already passed the Senate, but is being amended in the House to address federal FDA concerns. I have another bill they can take up. I have another bill.
What's that?
I have another bill. I have another one. The Reciprocity Act.
That's right. Yes. Where is that in the discussion?
It's in the Senate, but yeah.
It's not being talked about.
Yeah. At a Lincoln's Reagan dinner in his native Wisconsin over the weekend, Ryan pushed back on political pundits and those in his own party who are writing the GOP's obituary this fall. We're not going to get down. We're not going to get out. We're not going to have this historical tidal wave of midterm election funk get in our heads, Ryan told Republicans in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. Because of the GOP's accomplishments and results, he said, we're going to win. The speaker spent the bulk of his 20-minute speech talking up the benefits of the $1.5 million Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. As a result of the act, Americans have started seeing more take-home pay, and dozens of U.S. corporations are handing their workers bonuses, a message that Ryan and his leadership team have hammered home in countless press releases, cable TV hits, and tweets. That repetition eventually will begin to pay off as voters become more familiar with the tax cut law, many in the party say. I think the base knows the benefits knows the benefits. The political class knows it. The Democrats know it, but average Americans who are busy living their lives are only starting to look at it, said Phillips of Americans for Prosperity. But in that same speech, Ryan quickly skimmed over what he'd like Republicans to take up next, welfare reform. We're moving on to workforce development to make sure that people who are able-bodied and on welfare actually go to work, Ryan said, that we pull people out of the welfare into the workforce because it's good for them, it's good for society, it's exactly what we need to do to get people back in the job market. In the Chunuk Constitution, the federal government will be prohibited from doing welfare.
Haju.
Because welfare belongs in the private sector.
In the local private sector.
Yes.
That's where people can truly be helped.
Yes.
It's true compassion, true love.
Yes.
Rather than its false image of love.
76 cents out of every dollar that we contribute to the federal welfare system goes to the bureaucracy, not to the people that we think are actually receiving the money. 76%. I mean, a charity, charities, there are a few sites online that give you information about charities. One of them is guidestar.org, where you can go in and you can look up a charity, and you can see how much they've collected and where they've spent it and everything like that. It's on the forms that they submit to the IRS, and you can see exactly. And if you see a charity that is keeping 76% for itself and only giving 24%, now when I say keeping it for itself, I mean giving that as salaries to its employees, to its officers.
Give somewhere else.
You're not going to give to that charity.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think in that case the IRS would get after that charity to take a look at its 501c3 status, its charitable organization status. But that's what the federal government does. It takes 76% out of every dollar that we contribute to the welfare system and gives it to its own employees, its own officers.
And one has to ask how even the 24% is it being used effectively?
Right.
What's the results of that 24%?
Yes. So to talk about reforming welfare, we got some ideas on that. We'll send them a copy of the Chunuk Constitution.
And let churches get involved.
Yes, churches and other community organizations. Yes, churches, other religious organizations and community organizations, and families.
Yeah.
Families. Family is the best welfare system there is.
There used to be a social obligation that if you received help from your neighbor, you would repay that at some point after you've gone through your hardship, through your difficulty, your addiction, whatever it is. You've lost your job, but your neighbors come and help you through churches and through, like you said, religious organizations. Then there's a sense of obligation to pay back to the community that gave you and supported you in your time of need. That's a community, that's a tribe, that's a beautiful thing that can only really be accomplished on a local level. If this so-called federal bureaucracy, you receive this check in the mail, you have no idea it comes from taxpayer dollars, you get this sense of entitlement, and now people don't even feel any obligation, no sense of obligation to pay back society.
Yes.
And that's just not right.
So the bottom line is that Republicans still have a ways to go before they can get in line with what God wants them to be doing. But they're certainly we're certainly better off than if we had Hillary Clinton. We can at least keep reminding ourselves of that.
That's right. That's where Larry Pratt began his presentation at the Trump dinner the other night. He said, well, let's all celebrate the fact that Hillary is not in office. Yeah.
And let's, a year from now, be celebrating the fact that Nancy Pelosi is not Speaker of the House.
Oh, my God.
So, yes, we do need to make sure that Nancy Pelosi does not become the Speaker of the House. If that would mean that the Democrats have regained their majority in the House, and of course they will move to impeach Trump.
Yep.
And that is their,
stated goal.
That is their stated goal. The Republicans talk about prison reform, welfare, Democrats have just one word: impeach. Impeach.
And Maxine Walters will be elevated to whatever position. Who knows? Just think, when you go to that voting box, think Nancy and think Maxine.
Yes. There's a growing movement.
Can I give another report on health?
Before that, just since we were just talking about welfare, in a related story, more Americans now support a universal basic income. And this might not be bad if you eliminate all other forms of welfare. But if you keep the welfare system and you do a universal basic income, then it's a disaster. 48% of Americans support a universal basic income.
I doubt that so much. You would have to really see what kind of questions they asked in that survey. The whole concept to me is an insult. Is an insult to free enterprise, where people are rewarded for their hard work. Got to turn this off. Okay.
All right. Anyway, okay, I'll go ahead with your report.
Well, I just wanted to give, everybody's been praying for Lourdes, and she did suffer a mild stroke right before the Trump event. So she really paid a huge price for that event, and she worked, beyond her limits, and she was taken away in an emergency medical situation, and so she experienced a mild stroke. And everybody's been praying for her, and she's on the path to recovery. I spoke to Rick several times yesterday. It looks like she will recover, perhaps completely, which this is great news.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
you. The initial reports she might not be able to drive, but now they're saying at the end of yesterday that her left eye it could experience full recovery, which would allow her the ability to drive. So everybody's prayers. Still, please pray for Lourdes. And hopefully she'll be coming back to her home environment or the Scranton environment soon.
That's great. That's wonderful. I know that
God.
the king and his family have been praying for her, and of course the rest of us have been praying for her as well.
In fact, the king and queen visited her last night.
Ah, wonderful.
And gave her great encouragement.
That's wonderful.
In the hospital.
Means so much. But we all need to keep ourselves healthy.
Yes.
And as much as we can.
Yep.
Thank you for that report. Let's take a break now, and we'll come back with more news.
This world has nothing for me. This life is not my own. I know you go before me, and I am not alone.
Boy, wasn't that fun shooting this Tommy gun today?
It's always fun shooting Tommy guns. This one especially, it's just absolutely gorgeous.
all polished and chromed up. It really looks like $1 million.
Yeah, yeah. Elliot Ness would have loved one of those.
Yeah, and it's available right now in your favorite dealer, and you go pick one up.
Yeah, just have him call your distributor.
I mean, the gun, you know, was initially made way back when, back in the 27 is this one.
Yeah, Model 27.
I was surprised by how quick it knocked down those plates.
Oh, 3.5 second run, under 3.5 second run, knocking down a plate right. 341.
I mean, the gun is heavy. It's about what, 12, 14 pounds, especially with this drum. But it's surprising how quick you can go with it. It would actually make quite a good self-defense rifle at home.
If I climbed in somebody's window and they were aiming that at me, I think I'd get out of there real quick. So
that sounds about right to me.
Just the intimidation factor alone.
Fire!
Welcome back to the King's Report. Tim Elder and Greg Knoll in for the second king of Cheonryuguk, Hyung Ji-moon, on this 26th day of February 2018, a Tuesday. A nice, beautiful day. I see some mist or fog out there on the valley, but the sky is completely clear. You can see the New Jersey obelisk very clearly.
Not even a chemtrail in the sky.
Not even a chemtrail in the sky.
What is going on here?
I don't know.
Is it a holiday or?
Too good to fly, I guess. Too nice of a day to fly. I don't know. We usually see a few airliners passing by this time of day, but I don't see any. Okay. Meanwhile, rising mortgage rates hit new home sales hard, an ominous sign for builders. Home buyers increasingly can't afford what they want. Higher mortgage rates combined with a loss of homeowner tax breaks in some of the nation's most expensive markets are taking away buying power. Of course, now the ability to deduct your mortgage interest is limited, I believe, at a certain point. Higher than what I would normally pay, but I think it's $1 million or something like that. Or,
yeah, I don't know.
And I forgot the amount of loan. Anyway, it stops at a certain point. But in some places like San Francisco, $1 million doesn't go very far apparently anymore. Of course, that doesn't apply to this area around here, where you can get something very, very extremely good for perhaps a third of that amount. Sales of newly built homes are falling, and the culprit is clear. Home buyers increasingly can't afford what they want. Higher mortgage rates combined with the loss of homeowner tax breaks in some of the nation's most expensive markets are taking away buying power. Of course, the mortgage rates are rising because the Federal Reserve Board has been increasing interest rates. Sales fell in December when the new tax law was signed, and then again in January when mortgage rates moved higher. Sales are now at their lowest level since August of last year. The government's measure of new home sales is based on signed contracts during the month, reflecting the people who are out shopping and signing deals with builders. It is therefore a strong read on current reactions to home affordability. Mortgage rates moved a full 1/4 percentage point higher during January, from below 4% to about 4.25%. It then took off further from there. It seems that the jump in mortgage rates in January had an immediate impact on contract signings, wrote Peter Bukvar, Chief Investment Officer at the Blakely Advisory Group. I would think that if the mortgage rate starts moving higher, people would want to buy more before they become even higher. I don't know. Maybe I'm just
if you can lock in a rate,
yes,
you can have an immediate bump.
Yes.
But if you don't lock in a rate, you can really be screwed.
Right. Yes. Yes. Adjustable mortgage.
Yeah.
Especially with adjustable mortgages are based on that fraud they call LIBOR, the London interbank overnight rate.
You would have to be insane right now to do an adjustable mortgage with the climate, the economy.
Either that or you're just trying to support the banks.
Yeah.
You can't get more interest rate sensitive when it comes to homes and cars with the associated cost to finance. Higher home prices are adding to the difficulty for buyers. The median price for a newly built home rose to $323,000, a 2.5% gain compared with January 2017. Median means that there are an equal number of houses above that and below that. Builders are not only increasing prices, but they are also mostly focused on the move-up market, not the entry level where homes are needed most. While there is a severe shortage of existing homes for sale, the opposite appears to be the case in the new home market. Supply rose to the highest level in 4 years, another sign that the new construction is increasingly out of financial reach for today's home buyers. The drop in sales may be due to saturation in the upper price range of the market, which should compel builders to follow the market and build more moderately priced homes, wrote Joseph Kirchner, senior economist at Realtor.com. We may be beginning to see this with the largest drop for new home sales and homes priced above $500,000. The expectation had been for an increase in new home sales in January after the sharp drop in December. Some economists argue that when rates begin to rise, there is an initial surge. See there? I'm right. Reaction from buyers who want to get in before rates increase even further.
Yes.
Hey, see there? I was
Lock
right.
in the rate. You were right, Tim.
That did not happen. I didn't happen, though. I was wrong. Likely because affordability stood in the way. Okay, well, I was supposed to be right, but I wasn't.
They're really talking about these McMansions that have
Yes.
been very popular in the last 20 years.
Yes.
I think the millennials are more into smart, what would be called a smart home, where
Yes.
it's a more efficient, it's smaller, it's less space, more efficient use of space. I don't think a lot of people are going for these huge homes, these 3,000 to 4,000,
yeah.
5,000 square foot homes
And the
anymore.
King has encouraged young people to not get in debt, even for, many people assume that when you get a home, you're going into debt for 20 years.
That's part of the American dream.
Or 30 years. 30
That's
years,
the American dream,
That's
going
the American
into
dream.
debt.
Getting in debt is the American dream.
The slave of debt.
But he's encouraging them to work with what they can. So get a plot of land and have a tiny home, and
or a micro home,
or
6,000, 8,000 square feet that
That's
you
right.
can expand and grow.
Right.
That's not a bad strategy. You start with a nucleus segment of a home, and then your income increases and your economy justifies it, you start expanding
Yes.
from that.
Yes.
And there are good models of that.
Yes. I visited a home in this area that is really, I guess technically it's a log cabin, but it's a log mansion actually. And I talked to the owner, and he said that they built it themselves.
Yeah.
Over time, and it's a really wonderful home. That's a spectacular home, but they built it themselves, starting small and expanding over the years.
Another, the tiny home movement. My son is right now debating whether to pay an outrageous rent in California, $2,000 to $3,000 per month, or to purchase a tiny home that they live in, and it becomes an asset of their future
That's
kingdom.
right. That's right.
So maybe they buy a home in 10 years from now, but they'll still have that tiny home that they can have people like my wife and I come and visit them.
Okay, there you go. Take care of mom and dad.
You're right, and so it's good to
visit
invest.
them.
Yeah.
Okay. That's young people are making smart choices. That's a wonderful thing. All right, I want to go to InfoWars and see what's there. Breitbart, I saw a lot of good stuff on Breitbart this morning too. Let's see, the nuclear option, Florida massacre, media smell blood and ratings. Yep, that's what they do. They're smelling blood and ratings.
Sounds like Newfoundland. Sounds like Sanctuary Church, February 28th.
Anti-gun hog. Is he a junior or a senior at that high school? He's been sort of co-opted by CNN and MSNBC. I saw him speaking on MSNBC the other day. I saw him saying that how if there had been teachers with guns, then the police would have been confused who's the good guy and the bad guy. Didn't seem to realize that there were no police there.
They were outside behind their car.
They were outside. But anyway, he vows not to return to school until gun control. Seems like a good excuse to me.
You've heard of all the excuses.
Yeah. Well, if his parents want to homeschool him, that I can certainly understand that. That would be a good thing. Let's see. WAPO's Never Trumpers admit they aren't conservatives. report in private, Trump favors executing major drug traffickers. Hey, there we go. Little Duterte in America. Melania Trump, a youth speaking out about shootings deserve a voice. Yeah, everybody deserves a voice. That's our right. Georgia throwdown, conservatives fight back after Delta caves. Yes, Delta Airlines and United Airlines have stopped their discount for NRA members. But Lieutenant Governor vows no tax break for airline. And I think actually the legislature actually may be moving in that direction. So if Delta is going to cave in to the gun control advocates, then they're going to lose their tax break in Georgia. And that, of course, Georgia is their headquarters. Yeah, Pentagon restarts transgender recruitment. Boy. Free news gets scarcer as paywalls tighten, as we are finding on this King's Report. Sites keep asking us to pay them 99 cents just for one story. Report, U.S. allies prepare high seas crackdown of North Korean sanctioned Dodgers. Yeah, that's going to get pretty dicey. Interdicting ships on the high seas. Bombing continues in Syria's eastern Ghouta despite UN ceasefire resolution. Islamic State reemerges as in Al-Qaeda stronghold in Yemen. Chinese human rights lawyer mysteriously dies in military hospital. A lot of mysteries in China.
Oh my God.
Let's see. FedEx stands with NRA. There you go. Hey.
Okay.
There's somebody standing with NRA. Angry student hog blames GOP Governor Scott for deputy's failure. Urges boycotts of Amazon and FedEx. Yeah, of course. Exclusive talk legend Michael Savage unveils platform for possible California Senate run. Certainly wish him good luck there.
Yeah, he's a good man.
Border wall, deport aliens, English only voting, fix homelessness, cut taxes, no more racism and conservationism. All right. And here we have a photograph of a young lady there. Fact check, video games do not cause violence. Not so sure about that. Report Twitter $770 million SoundCloud investment is a failure. Lawsuit, Google's bro culture led to sexual harassment. CNN President Jeff Zucker calls for regulators to probe Facebook and Google. Heather Locklear, doesn't look like what she used to. Arrested on charges of domestic violence, battery on police officers. Director Kevin Smith, massive heart attack. Actor Pratt mobbed after sending him healing power of prayer. Update, White House rebukes SCOTUS after DACA saved. What happened to that report that I had yesterday about the FISA court? Let me see if I can just bring that up. Yeah, here we go. I wanted to, we have a few minutes, and this was an article that I saw on World News Daily, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it gives us some information, interesting information about the FISA court. Super secret spy court raises alarms over Fed snooping. 11 judges exercise sweeping power behind door fortified with biometric hand scanners. And this is the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse in Washington, D.C., where the secret FISA court reportedly operates. Reportedly. We don't know.
It's a secret court.
It's a secret court. All right? But we do know some things. For one thing, we know the people who are on it. These are the people who are on it. The lady on the right there is the presiding FISA court judge, Rosemary Collier. And her colleagues here, FISA court judge James E. Boasberg. On the right, FISA court judge Rudolph Contreras. On the left, FISA court judge Ann C. Conway. On the right, FISA court judge Joseph R. Deary. On the left, FISA court judge Claire Egan. Yes. On the right, FISA court judge James Parker Jones. FISA court on the left, FISA court judge Robert Kugler. On the right, FISA court judge Michael Mosman. On the left, FISA court judge Thomas B. Russell. On the right, FISA court judge F. Dennis Saylor. And so these are the folks who approve 99.98% of the warrant applications that they review. What are they even there for? Like I say, I want to see Out of 30,000, they rejected 5. I want to see the 5. I mean, were they written on toilet paper? Were they written by a 5-year-old? I mean, what does it take? How bad does it have to be for an application to be rejected by the FISA court?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. Inquiring minds want to know.
And how do they get appointed into the FISA court?
They are appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Mm.
Yes, and they have terms. They have terms of, I believe it is 7 years. Term of FISA court judge judge. I saw a list one time, and I believe 7-year term. Yes, with one judge being appointed each year. Yeah. And they are appointed by the Supreme Court justices, court appeals court judges, and district court judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the United States Senate, as stated in the Constitution. No, but that's that. But FISA is different. FISA, they are appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And this article brings up some interesting points here. It's a mysterious court that hides behind a hulking vaulted door and impenetrable concrete walls, and it's where the federal government makes some of the most secretive decisions concerning Americans' basic liberties. If you dare ask where the secret court is located, employees at the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse in Washington, D.C., where the court reportedly relocated in 2009, won't tell you. That's because the super secret court is far beyond the reach of any journalist or curious American citizen. Fortified with biometric hand scanners, wooden and metal doors, and walls reinforced by concrete, it's the room where it all happens. 11 powerful court judges approve wiretaps, data collection, and government requests to monitor suspected terrorist spies and even American citizens. And they're given sweeping power under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. In 2013, Eric Mill, a blogger and alum of Sunlight Foundation, a nonprofit organization that advocates for government transparency, documented his efforts to learn more about the nation's most secure and secretive courtroom. Mill presents images of the mysterious Washington institution through illustrations because, he explained, one of the first things that happens when you walk into the Prettyman Courthouse is they take away your phone. So this is his illustration that he drew from memory, I guess. Employees at the courthouse reportedly laughed at Mill's endeavor and referred to the FISA courtroom as the, quote, room of requirement, unquote. They claimed they had no idea what floor it was on. Still, Mill wandered the long hallways and located what appeared to be a door to the FISA court. To the right of the court, to the right of the door next to the intercom, the small sign saying access restricted is a biometric hand scanner, he wrote. It's probably a Schlag hand key 2, a device that quickly snapshots the three-dimensional bone and joint structure of the hand and matches it against previously registered snapshots. Established in 1978 at the height of the Cold War, the clandestine FISA court, known as the U.S. Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, is located blocks away from the White House and the Capitol in a bunker-like complex. The barest details about the court and its oversight were publicly disclosed. Were publicly disclosed until the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, when 19 militants, authorities began dramatically intensifying their espionage efforts, doubling the number of warrant applications. This prompted the court to authorize sweeping collections of mass data. The FISA court approves more than 99%, actually 99.98%, of the domestic electronic surveillance requests that Deep State brings to their vaulted door, according to the Wall Street Journal. A 2016 Justice Department report showed the National Security Agency and the FBI made 1,457 requests for permission to the FISA court to conduct its surveillance in 2015. While it is the sole responsibility of the FISA court to scrutinize every one of these requests, only one application was rejected by the... I want to see that one. You know? How bad? Was it written by a 5-year-old? How bad does it have to be rejected? Only one application was rejected by the government in all of 2015.
What's the budget for the FISA court? How much money is being spent
from
our taxpayer dollars?
How dare you ask?
No, I'm serious. These are all very expensive lawyers and judges.
As for the rest, FISC did not deny any applications in whole or in part, the Justice Department said. The FISA court also issues subpoenas that intelligence agencies use to compel private companies to turn over personal data on customers. These national security letters contain everything from Americans' billing information to their browsing histories. And we don't know about it. We have no right to know about it.
That's right. And it's your dollars, my dollars, paying for these guys somehow.
We're running out of time, so I just want to have this. If I can. Anyway, going down here, the super secret court, which is capable of destroying American liberty and violating Americans' Fourth Amendment protections, must be reformed, warns Representative Scott Perry, Republican of Pennsylvania. Not our area, but anyways, in Pennsylvania. If you think they won't come after you, I mean, they are trying to take down the President of the United States. How much more do you have to see? Do you think they're worried about your average American citizen? Perry asked in an exclusive interview with World News Daily. The court's cavalier approach to issuing a surveillance warrant that potentially undermines the legitimacy of the presidential election demonstrates such a severe disrespect for civil liberties that the entire FISA system should be examined, Perry said. If they will spy on the President of the United States or a candidate for the President of the United States, do you think they are going to spy on somebody like you, he asked. They can surveil whomever they want to, do whatever they want to.
That sounds like China.
It does, doesn't it?
Sounds like something not American.
Yes, it does. The real problem lies with Congress, which authorized the FISA court, gave it extraordinary authority, and failed to stipulate surveillance limitations, Perry said. But then, get this, President Trump signed the FISA Amendments Reauthorization Act of 2017 into law just weeks ago on January 20th. The current authorization will expire in December 2023. So President Trump dropped the ball on this. He should have vetoed that. The FISA court process is intended to be the legal check on the government's surveillance powers, but Perry said the court authorizes virtually all requests submitted by the intelligence agency. So it's not performing its function. It's just there. These 11 people that you see here, I noticed they're all white. Just noticing. All right, just noticing.
How is that allowed?
I noticed they're all white. Just noticing. All right, we're at the end of this broadcast, what is Southern Poverty Law Center doing about this? All right.
It's a hate court.
Yes.
All right. Thank you,
we're at the end of our broadcast. I encourage you to take a closer look at that article in the World News Daily. We're having a beautiful day, so get outside and enjoy nature if you can. Greg and I may not have that luxury today, but weather will last until tomorrow. So after tomorrow, perhaps we will. All right. Have a good day. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.
When the night's closing on my skin, oh God, will you come close?